Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto gained his memories of the past life part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. It is happening again. The cycle has begun anew, and spring has once more risen from the depths of winter. All is well. A little green sprout. The beginning of a new end. Shoulders its way out of the earth. New and different, and yet the heart is the same. It is happening again. It twines and grows. All is well. Colored by seasons past. No. Something is wrong. Splits into 2 flower buds fast asleep. 2 cannot share a single set of roots. It is wrong. Waiting for the day. It is happening again, but not the way it's supposed to. That they bloom. It is wrong. It is wrong. It is row. Let me see. A gasp. Her eyes. Yes. Can anything be done? We tried what we could, but her optic nerve was deformed beyond repair. I'm very sorry, Akadu-san, but the child will probably be blind for life. Fear. It was everywhere. What was happening? It was very dark. But it's always dark. No, it was dark. Dark enough to claw at your heart, dark enough to chill the warmth beneath your skin. It reached deep inside you until all you could feel was dark and heavy and fear. Something howled in the distance. I shivered and burrowed deeper into my brother's side. Tried to calm the roiling panic in my chest. But I couldn't, not really. The air was stifling. Everything smelled like fear. Where's Mom and Dad? My voice sounded so small. Don't worry, said my brother, not really answering my question. They'll be back soon. I didn't believe him. Couldn't. His voice trembled and I could feel the fear curling off his skin. There was a distant boom. Frantic yelling. Promise? I asked, trying to ignore the screams. I promise. Go back to sleep, Mayo. I obliged, though it was more for his sake than mine. When I finally did fall asleep, though, it was far from relaxing. Monsters haunted my dreams that evening, nightmarish demons that I should never have been able to see. The next morning, I woke up feeling strangely empty. The fear was gone, and the air was once again light and quietly humming. I propped myself up on my bed next to my snoring brother and waited for my parents to come back. It was 4 days before my mother came back from the hospital. My father never came back at all. Whistle. Thud. You're Nai-san? MMN? Whistle. Thud. What are you doing? Throwing kunai. Whistle. Thud. Eh? You know, training. Got to keep in shape for the academy. I'm gonna be a ninja, you know? Like Mom. My heart skipped a beat. Mom was a ninja? Were we a family of ninja? Ninja. Assassin. Swathed in black, bringer of death. We kill people? I squeaked, and then stopped. Where did that thought come from? Well, yeah, he said, matter of fact. But ninja don't just go around killing people, you know. They protect things. Like the village, and the civilians. It's an honor to be a ninja. I played with my fingers and stayed silent, unsure of how to respond. Then there was another whistling sound, quickly followed by a thud, and I knew he had resumed training. After a moment, he began to talk again. When I become a ninja, Mom won't have to work so hard 'cause I'm gonna get paid. And then I'll become strong enough to protect you, Mayo. I stopped fiddling with my fingers. Protect me? There was a chuckle. Big brothers gotta look out for their little sisters. You know? The warmth beneath my skin hummed and grew a little warmer. Yeah. We both fell silent after that. Yoroi continued flinging kunai, and I flopped down in the grass of our backyard, enjoying the tickly feeling of the blades as they brushed against my skin. If I concentrated very hard, I could even sense the vibrant feeling of life that the plants exuded. It was very much like the humming warmth that ran through my own body, but a bit different. It was as I pondered this strange phenomenon that another thought occurred to me. So you train all the time, I said over the rhythmic sounds of whistling and thudding. Is that why you never play with me anymore? He was amused. I could tell. Did ya miss me, Mayo-chan? I grinned. Not really. Brat. Whistle, whistle, whistle. Oh, was that 3 kunai at the same time? Wow, that seemed like it would take a lot of skill. Splat. 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 That didn't sound good. And judging by the location of the sound in the backyard. That was Mom's favorite tomato plant, I said. You're accursed. My brother graduated. It was a big event and all of us were excited. Even Mom was taking a day off from hospital work to come to the graduation ceremony. Ever since Dad left us, Mom had to work twice as hard to keep food on the table. Late nights, double shifts. We barely ever spent time with Mom anymore. Your brother is up next, Mom whispered happily, breaking me out of my thoughts. With one hand, she gently turned my face towards the direction of Yoroi. Not that I needed it, I could tell where he was just from the feeling of his vibrancy. Akidu Yoroi, one of the Chunin instructors, intoned, and the ceremony commenced. I did not know exactly what happened during the ceremony, and I didn't care. All that mattered was my brother's presence, as he blazed with pride and joy. What are you humming? Mom asked. Surprised, I blinked. I didn't even realize. The graduation march, I said, without thinking. Mom laughed. How fitting. Did you make it up yourself? No, I paused, confused. Pomp and circumstance. March number 1, the graduation march. It was familiar, but I was pretty certain I'd never heard of it before. I guess I did, I finally said. Mom. Mayo. That was my brother. He was still radiating joy. Up close, it was like being next to the sun. My own warmth responded to his, and I felt myself growing happier, lighter. I smiled. Ni-san. Congratulations. Thanks, Imoto-chan. It's kind of amazing, you know. I still can't believe I graduated, but I did, and the forehead protector is really cool. He enthused, beginning to babble. Earlier I thought I'd attach the forehead protector to my bandana, you know. The sewing was hard, but Mom helped, and well. How does it look? For a second I just blinked, unsure of what to say. Yoroi seemed to pick up on this, since there was a sudden slapping noise. Did he just slap his own face? He certainly did that a lot. Sorry, Mayo, sometimes I forget. It's okay, Nii-san, I cut in, not liking how guilty he felt. I think you're very pretty. Almost like a girl. There was a spluttering sound, and my brother instantly switched from apologetic to indignant. Why, you little? I gave a small shriek and tried to flee. Unfortunately, I wasn't fast enough to escape his brutal tickle attack. Save me, Mom! I cried out in between helpless giggles. The pretty monster is attacking me. Yoroi growled and increased the tickling intensity. Mom just laughed. And then you end the downward sweep with a hook, Mom lectured, guiding my hand in hers as I held the pencil. There, see? Now let's retrace it a few times so you can get the hang of it. Okay, I said, trying to ignore the niggling feeling at the back of my mind. We repeated it a few times, and the niggling feeling evolved into full-blown unease when I realized I recognized the characters. May die. But that didn't make sense. There was no way. Just no way. Mom? I asked, as I retraced the words for the 7th or 8th time. I squashed down my apprehension. What does it say? It's the kanji for your name, dear. Mayo. Oh. I wasn't sure if I felt relieved or disappointed to be wrong. But I was so sure. I frowned and shook it off. It didn't matter. Sighing inwardly, I cast my mind about in an effort to change the subject. Hey, Mom, you're going to teach me reading and writing and stuff, right? Yes, that's what I said, she replied patiently. I pondered this a little. She had more time to spare, now that Yoroi was also bringing in money for the family. It wasn't much, but it was something. She could, at least, afford to spend time teaching me now. So am I still going to school? There was a brief hesitation. Then, maybe a bit later, Mayo-chan. I'm not sure I want you out of the house by yourself just yet. My brow furrowed. Am I going to be a ninja? Like you and Yoroi Nii-san? A much longer hesitation this time. I don't think so, she finally said very gently. A vague sense of sadness leaked from her, like cold drops of rain. It mingled with my own vibrancy, and I felt the warmth under my skin cool in response. Oh, I said again, once more with the warring feelings of relief and disappointment. I think that's enough for today, Mom said, with that same gentle tone. Why don't you head off for bed? Here, I'll help you. I let her guide me to my bedroom, even though I could have easily done it myself. Do you like it, Mayo? What is it? I asked my brother, fingering the tube-like object he had just presented to me. It's a bamboo flute. Here, you hold it like this. He positioned my fingers over carved holes, and moved the flute so that the head joint met my lips. See? And then you blow. I blew. A thin, reedy noise sprang from the instrument. Oh, I said, delighted, and immediately began experimenting with different fingerings. It was strange. I knew I'd never played a flute before in my life, but it just felt right. You were always singing and making up your weird little tunes, you know, said Yoroi, sounding pleased with himself. So I thought, why don't I get her an instrument for her birthday? Took about a mission's worth of pay, but I think it was worth it. A mission's worth of pay. Of course. I had almost forgotten. With Yoroi working as a genin, I was the only one not actively contributing to the family. Dead weight. I slowly lowered the flute and set it on the table. Mayo? You in there? It's perfect, I said. Thank you. Well, I'm glad you like it, he said, sounding uncertain. Mom must have sensed the heavy atmosphere because she hastily intervened. Why don't you open my present, Mayo-chan? There was a light shuffling noise, and a small box was pressed into my fingers. Mechanically, I peeled off the wrapping paper and opened the box. Why did they even bother to wrap the gifts? It wasn't as if I could see them anyway. They're lavender seeds, Mom explained when I didn't say anything. Oh. Thank you, Mom. I'll show you how to care for them later. Lavender has the most gorgeous smell. I'm sure you'll like it. Okay, I said, voice blank. Carefully, I set down the packet of seeds next to the flute. If you get good enough with the plants, maybe one day you could help me in the hospital greenhouse. Gardener, huh? Mom, what do you think I'll be when I grow up? Mom hummed. You've only just turned 5, Mayo-chan. There's still a lot of time. I fidgeted a bit. But what can I be when I grow up? There was an uncomfortable silence. Yoroi spoke up hesitantly. Mayo, I'm sure there will be plenty of safe jobs for you to choose from later. My head drooped. A safe job. A safe job. My entire family were ninja. You couldn't ask for a more dangerous job than that. Dad had died in the line of duty, defending the village from the QB attack. Mom was a medic, but when the time called for it she was in the field, fighting as hard as anyone. And Yoroi, well, his missions weren't exactly going to get easier. It seemed awfully unfair that I would get some cushy job watering plants while they were all out there, constantly risking their lives. It's an honor to be a ninja. I clenched my fists. Maybe I was being arrogant. Maybe I was getting ahead of myself. Maybe I was too young, too small, too weak. But I couldn't help but hope that one day, I'd grow into something great. And then I'll be strong enough to protect you. Well, what do you want to be, Mayo-chan? Mom asked, voice quiet. I lifted my chin and stared directly at where I knew her face would be. I want to be a ninja. You did what? We sent him on a covert operation too. Ugh, I know what you did. You, on the other hand, seem to have no idea what you've just condemned him to. Nissan, calm down and think. If the mission is successful. Irrelevant, because it won't be. If the mission is successful, our village will be greatly strengthened. And if by chance he fails, we'd still have plausible deniability. This isn't about plausible deniability. You don't understand, he's going to be killed. Your concern for your fellow ninja is commendable, but don't you think you ought to have a little more faith in your head? He will be killed. Killed, as in dead, as in gone, as in not alive anymore. I understand what the word means. Then why aren't you doing anything? There is nothing to be done. Everything is fine. Now, if you're finished. The hell I am. Nissan. Please. This conversation is over. But. Over. My fingers fumbled a bit, but I managed to tie the jute around the stems. Is this okay? I held up my bundle of herbs for Mom to inspect. I'm a bit tighter, I think. I pulled harder. Like this? Yes, she decided after a pause. Very good. Now, we hang them to dry, remember, no direct sunlight. I know. Mom proceeded to show me how to hang the herbs, guiding my hands as she pinned each bundle with wooden clothespins. Once I began getting the hang of it, no pun intended, she left me to my own devices and began working on a new row. Hey, Mom? Yes? Herbs rustled as she did her work. Why do we hang them upside down? That's a good question. You see, we hang the plants upside down because we want all the natural oils to travel into the leaves. That way we can better access them. Well, I guess that makes sense, I thought as I reached out to grab another bunch. It wasn't until my hand groped thin air that I realized we'd finished. Almost done, Mom said. Stay here for a second, please. I need to get the paper bags. Light footsteps sounded out as she left the room. I didn't mind waiting here. The scent of fresh herbs was very pleasant, wispy cool and subtly sharp all at the same time. A faint tap 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 heralded the return of my mother. Paper bags crinkled as she set them down on the table next to me. Here, Mayo-chan, help me tie the bags onto the herbs. What are they for? We want to protect them from contamination. And this way, we can also collect any seeds that might fall off. Here, you tie it on like this. I felt warm hands envelop mine, reaching up to tie the paper bags around the stems. Yes, just like that. Not too tight now. As we worked, I noted all the different aromas. Mom had gathered a variety of herbs, and each type had a unique smell. It was actually kind of fun, experiencing and trying to differentiate between the various scents. I paused over one bunch that was particularly aromatic. Mom, what kind of herb is this? It smells nice. It does, doesn't it? It's called sage. Sage. I took a deep breath and memorized its smell. How about this one? I indicated another clipped bundle. That one is lavender. So this is lavender. I decided I liked its scent. Are you going to tell me about the other herbs too? Mom laughed. Well, aren't you the curious one today? Don't worry, dear. Soon I'll be teaching you everything I know about plants. After all, you'll need to be as prepared as possible if you're going to be a ninja someday. The sun warmed my back as I sat with Mom in the garden. Something brushed the edge of my senses and I wondered if it was one of Yoroi's teammates. It did feel familiar. Concentrate. Rosemary, I said, focusing back on the task at hand. Correct. This one? Daisy. Wait, no dandelion. Good. How about myrrh? Yes. Try. I smiled at the familiar scent. Easy. Lavender. Well done, Mayo-chan. You're very good at this. I ducked my head. Although I wouldn't ever admit it, I enjoyed the praise. It's not that hard, Mom. They all feel pretty different. Feel? Mom said quizzically. But you didn't touch any of them, weren't you going by smell? Smell was certainly one method of differentiation, but there was something else, something more recognizable, more fundamental than any scent could ever be. They feel different, I repeated, unsure of how to explain. Like, the vibrancy. The what? Vibrancy. I gestured around myself. The stuff that sort of hums everywhere, the warmth under your skin. For a few seconds, Mom was silent. Then she spoke, and her voice was low and thoughtful. You say it's everywhere? This, vibrancy? Yeah, I said. Inside people, inside plants, even in the air. It's different for different plants, so that's how I can tell. Mom fell silent again. I began to feel just a bit uneasy. The silence this time was intense, somehow. Even the warm sun that had been so pleasant before now made me feel sticky and uncomfortable. My fingers, needing something to do, started to pluck at grass blades. Mom? I ventured, when I could no longer stand the silence. My voice seemed to snap her out of whatever reverie she was in. Yes? Is something wrong? It's nothing, dear. Just thinking, Mom assured me. She then paused, as if considering something. Tell me, have you ever heard of chakra? Ever since I could remember, there was vibrancy. It ran flush through every living being. It sang beneath my skin, the very air thrummed with it. It was my vision, my crutch, my world. Without it, I'd be lost in the darkness. Mom said it was called chakra. I don't know why I was so surprised to hear it had a name. It just always seemed so untouchable. Mysterious. Nameless. Assigning it a name felt wrong, as if in doing so I was stripping it of some vital part of its very being, its very identity. Although, a part of me rationalized, I guess people had to call it something. According to Mom, it took most children a while to become aware of their own chakra, not to mention the chakra around them. I don't know if I was a natural sensor or if it was just something I had developed to make up for lost eyesight. Maybe both. In any case, Mom was very pleased, and decided that I should take full advantage of my ability by strengthening my spatial awareness. So she built an obstacle course. Which leads me to my current situation. Oof. I fell over. All right, Mayo-chan? Came the distant voice of my mother. I'm fine, I called back, rubbing my arm. I had misjudged the distance between myself and the potted plant. Frowning, I concentrated on the feel of the plant's warmth chakra. I reminded myself and began to edge my way around it. There, made it. Oh, was that a wall? It did seem to possess a distinct lack of chakra. I reached my hand out and gave an experimental prod. Yes, definitely a wall. I inched sideways, not wanting to collide with the wall, when I noticed something near Maya chakra that was warm and oily smooth. Some sort of plant, maybe? It felt familiar, so it was probably one of the many that Mom showed to me. Whatever it was curled all over the ground and had twined itself along the wall like ivy. Ivy. My eyes widened and I froze in mid-step. Poison ivy. Mom was so mean. Closing my eyes, not that it really made a difference in perception, but it did help me focus, and focus was what I needed right now. I took a deep breath, estimated the position of the poisonous plant, stretched my foot over it, tried to ease out of the way. And tripped. And got a face full of poison ivy. I can't believe I misjudged the distance. Again. Horrified, I scrambled off the plant and tried to get away. In my haste, I managed about 3 steps across the uneven ground before I tripped again and smacked into a wall. Ouch. 5 falls and 7 collisions later, I made it out of the labyrinth. I must have seemed a very unhappy mess. My arms and legs were riddled with bruises, and my face was swelling up rather magnificently. That was very good for your first try, Mom said as she rubbed something on my face. Jewelweed, I thought, before my brain caught up to Mom's words. Wait, first try, I said before wincing. Talking was painful and made my face stretch. Of course, she said airily, with a hint of amusement. Didn't I tell you? We'll be doing this daily from now on. Mom and I were having dinner when a very panicked Yoroi burst through the front door. Oh my God! Yoroi-san? Oh my God! Yoroi-san, what's wrong? What's wrong? I'm going to die. Yoroi-kun, please calm down and take your shoes off. I just cleaned the floor this morning. Mom's serene tone seemed to do the trick because I felt his chakra settle down. After he'd washed his hands and seated himself at the table, Mom began to talk again. Now, what's this I hear about dying? I passed the second stage of the Chunin exams, Yoroi said. He sounded miserable. Isn't that a good thing? My brother sighed. You know the one-on-one matches in the finals? The guy I'm supposed to fight first is a freaking monster. Who are you fighting? Asked Mom. Some psychopath from AIM named Kiri something or other. You didn't see him. In the second stage he was literally slaughtering people left and right. Oh. Well, that didn't sound so good. When are the finals? In a month. I am so gonna die. No one is going to die, Mom said firmly. You'll just have to work hard this month, won't you? Yoroi didn't respond. His chakra had dimmed over the course of our conversation. It reminded me of the frail heat of a dying light bulb. Dull, weak, despondent. I didn't like it. Making up my mind, I reached over and tugged at his sleeve. When I was certain I had his attention, I gave him a small smile. Don't worry, Ni-san, I believe in you. The crazy AIM ninja doesn't stand a chance. It was cheesy and a bit embarrassing, yes, but sincere as well. And when I felt my brother's spirits lift, I decided that it was more than worth it. My brother spent the next month working himself into the ground. Given the amount of time he spent at the training ground, she all but lived there, I was certain he'd do fine in the last stage of the exams. Yoroi, on the other hand, didn't seem to think so. He was shaking so hard I could feel it. From 3 feet away. You okay, Ni-san? I asked. Why yeah, he said, not convincing me in the least. Hoping to ease his nerves, I handed him a small pouch. Time to show him what I'd been working on for the past month. Here, take this. Oh, thanks. What is it? Energy pill, blood pill, healing cream, I said, pointing at each pocket as I listed them. Mom's secret recipe. Yoroi's grip slackened. If I hadn't been holding on to the pouch, he would have dropped it. Oh wow, you actually made all this? For me? I poked him, a little exasperated. Well, yeah? Mom and I wanted to help. It was your sister's idea, Mom said, patting my head. Although I did most of the work, she added teasingly. For a moment my brother was speechless. Then the dam broke. Oh my god, thank you so much, you guys are the best sister and mom in the whole world, I love you now, I might not die after all. We waited patiently for him to finish his tirade. When he finally ran out of steam, a slapping noise sounded out, a facepalm, and my brother's, significantly less frantic voice spoke up. Sorry, I guess I was a bit more high-strung than I thought. If you're really that worried, you could always drop out and try again next year, came Mom's amused voice. No way, he said immediately, which surprised me. I had expected him to agree, or laugh it off, or at the very least consider her suggestion. But if anything, Mom's offhand comment seemed to strengthen my brother's resolve. I mean, he trailed off, voice turning pensive. I failed the past 2 Chunin exams, But Iwashi made Chunin on his first attempt. I can't let myself fall behind any further, I've gotta at least try. I smiled. We know. A bell sounded and the proctor called for all the contestants to make their way to the center of the stadium. Yoroi breathed in deeply. Well, I guess this is it. Wish me luck. My smile widened to a grin. Don't be silly, Anai-san. You don't need luck. As Yoroi went to the center of the stadium, Mom and I made our way up into the stands. At first, I didn't dare let go of Mom's hand. The stadium was large and crowded and loud. It was disorienting, too, with so many chakra signatures squashed together in one place. I could barely think straight, never mind walk straight. It took me a long while to adjust to my surroundings. The fights weren't easy to follow either. I had to rely on my mother's explanations, which were often riddled with ninja jargon that I couldn't comprehend. Even so, when Yoroi's turn came, I was instantly on the edge of my seat demanding to know what was going on. In my agitation, I made Mom narrate the entire fight even though I didn't understand half of what she said. After nearly 10 minutes of fighting, Yoroi surprised everyone, including himself, I think, by managing to pull off a last-second win against his psychotic adversary. The entire stadium was roaring with applause, and I don't think I'd ever felt so proud in my life. Our family returned home that day in high spirits. When evening came, I helped Mom make a celebratory dinner for the 3 of us, in honor of Yoroi's victory and not death. Do you think you'll pass? I asked my brother as I picked up my chopsticks. I dunno. Probably not, since I barely won the first match and forfeited the second. We'll see in time, said Mom, the ever-patient one. No use worrying over it now. And so the matter was temporarily laid to rest. Mom handed me the teapot. Chamomile? I asked, recognizing the scent. Yes. Careful, it's hot. I know, Mom, I said before pausing. A familiar chakra signature was rapidly approaching the house. Oh, I think Anai-san is home. The door slammed open, prompting me to spill the tea all over my breakfast. I knew my brother was coming, yes, but that didn't mean I was prepared for the sheer amount of noise that preceded his arrival. Mom, on the other hand, seemed unfazed by the dramatic entrance, and merely greeted him with a hello, Yoroi-kun. Mom, Mayo! You'll never guess. I poked at my tea-drenched rice, before deciding that it was still edible. What is it? I asked, turning my attention back to Yoroi. His chakra, vibrant and excited, spiraled around him in little eddies of energy. Whatever had happened, it had to be pretty big. I did it, he said, voice tinged with awe. It took me a while to figure out what he meant, but when I did I nearly dropped the teapot. I passed, he continued, in that same exultant tone. I'm a chunin now. My, but they do grow up quickly, mused Akidaran as she ushered her daughter through the front doors of the academy. 6 years old and already aspiring to become a ninja. Never would have thought. It was indeed hard to believe. The moment Mayo was diagnosed with blindness, her ninja career had been considered over before it even began. Not to say, of course, that a blind ninja was an impossibility, in the contrary. Ran knew several ninja who, despite similar ailments, had successful careers. Still, no matter how you looked at it, blindness was a disadvantage. A disability. To overcome it would require stubbornness, determination, and a very, very strong will. Mayo had none of these. The girl was clever, yes, but even cleverness could only get you so far. She was too yielding, too quick to please, too weak-willed, too nice. Toss her in a world where everyone raced to come out on top, and she'd be trampled without mercy. Or at least, that's what Ran had thought. That day on Mio's 5th birthday, when her daughter had a skedno, demanded to be a ninja, that day had proven her wrong. It was the first time Mayo had ever seemed to want something so badly. The first time she had such fire in her eyes. Ran liked to think of herself as tough. At nearly 40 years of age, she had survived 2 shinobi world wars, outlived all of her genin teammates, even seen her husband die. But when her daughter had asked her like that, looking so alive for the first time in 5 years, she had found herself unable to say no. "Can I help you, miss?" someone asked, breaking Ran out of her long-winded thoughts. A lone chunin was sitting at the registration table, one eyebrow raised. Ran blinked and realized that she'd been standing there for a long time. "Ah, yes," Ran said, recovering quickly. She gestured towards Mayo, who was clinging to her leg like a particularly determined barnacle. "This is my daughter, Akida Mayo. She'll be starting the academy this year." "Akida Mayo," the chunin muttered, flipping through the notes on his clipboard. "Let's see, here we go. Room 112, Funino Daikoku. Down the hall, make a right." "Thank you," said Ran. "There's an initiation ceremony at noon," the chunin added. "Don't forget to attend." Ran smiled. "We'll be sure to remember. Now let's go, Mayo-chan." The Hokage was saying something, I think. For the will of fire within. Yes, he was definitely saying something. Look forward to seeing how this new generation. I wasn't really paying attention, though. Not to his words, not when his chakra was so much more interesting. And throughout everything begin to. It was weird. Veiled somehow. Like smelling flowers through a sheet of plastic wrap, or handling a prickly plant with thick gloves. And yet, despite its muted quality, it retained a sort of. No greater test of character. A sort of character. "Everyone, congratulations on entering," said the Hokage, his voice suddenly much warmer. Something had changed. It was enough to startle me back into attention. The barrier had slipped, his chakra was spilling out. The warmth was spreading now, and it was so open and clear that I could finally grasp that elusive sense of character. Pensive, deliberate, vast, unfathomable. Like the slow-moving chakra of the oaks that sometimes lined Konoha's streets, but more powerful. I found that it moved me. Moved us all, each one of us, even as we stood in our rigid, militant rows. From this day forth, the Hokage concluded, please work hard to follow the shinobi way. I grinned and couldn't help but stand a little straighter. All around me, I felt my soon-to-be classmates do the same. Strange, how a bit of public speaking could be so inspiring. Public speaking, I thought, really sucks. I could feel it. Class's entire attention was focused on me, solely on me, and it was suffocating, and my hands were trembling and my legs felt like wet clay, and I was taking out the nervousness on my fingers, which were no doubt twisting into odd shapes. And oh yes, did I mention how horrible public speaking was? Your name, child, Daikoku-sensei said for the umpteenth time. He sounded strained. AKA, Akademio, I mumbled, voice getting progressively softer. Akademio, he repeated, relief coloring his tone. Okay then, Mayo-chan, why don't you tell us about yourself? I opened my mouth but nothing came out save for a strangled squeak. One of my classmates tittered and I snapped my mouth shut, embarrassed. Any hobbies? Likes, dislikes, dreams for the future? My mouth remained stubbornly shut. Anything? Silence. Daikoku-sensei sighed. I guess that'll have to do, he said, before moving on to the next student. The class's unnerving attention shifted away, the weight of their scrutiny lifted, and I could finally breathe again. Are you okay? Asked the kid next to me when I slumped back into my seat. I'm fine, I said, before slamming my head down on the desk and pretending as hard as I could that I didn't exist. To my classmates' delight, Daikoku-sensei let us have a quick break after introductions. The entire class burst into a flurry of motion as they hurried toward the door. I followed them, but at a slower pace. All the excitement and chatter was a bit disorienting, and I didn't want to trip over anything. Besides, I'd had enough embarrassment for one day. Oh, hey, someone said when I stepped outside into the warm sunshine. I tilted my head, recognizing the voice. It was the same boy, or girl, I couldn't tell, who'd asked if I was alright after my disastrous introduction. Am I alright? Oh, he was talking to me. I knew that. Yes, I said, a bit wary. Almost unconsciously, I began to tug at my fingers. We're gonna play ninja, she continued, and it was then that I noticed the 6 or so chakra signatures that were huddled behind him. You want to join? My fingers paused as I considered the invitation. Because of my condition, I spent most of my time at home. My closest friends were the stuffed animals in my bedroom and the plants in the garden. It wasn't lonely, not real, it's just that I'd never played with other children before. The idea of it was completely alien, and yet at the same time, strangely tantalizing. Okay, I finally said. As the circle of children shuffled to make space for me to include mesomething inside me felt inexplicably warm. Right, said the boy girl. So you know how to play, right? I think so. Let's start the now. There was an awkward silence, and I wondered if I did something wrong. Why did you slap my hand? The boy girl asked slowly. I cocked my head. Isn't that how you play ninja? An incredulous pause. Course not. You're so weird. Here, this is how you play. And he or she proceeded to explain the rules. I tried to pay attention, but was again distracted by ponderings of his/her ambiguous gender. Mom had once told me that chakra systems were different for boys and girls, but my chakra sense wasn't refined enough to detect that discrepancy. Which left me dependent on recognition through voice, but at this age everyone sounded so androgynous. Hey, are you listening? I blinked and offered a sheepish grin in response. Oh, let's just play already, someone said, evidently tired of waiting. Yeah, another kid agreed. Come on, Tenten, who cares about the rules? We can just make them up as we go along. The name caught my attention. Tenten. Heavenly? Or little by little? Was that a masculine name or a feminine name? Tenten sighed, interrupting my internal dilemma. Oh, all right. And suddenly, I didn't have time to ponder anymore as we were swept up in a large, confusing game of ninja. The game was a mess. I had no idea what was going on half the time. We'd split into 2 teams, I think Konohanin and Enemy Nin, but anything beyond that was anyone's guess. All I knew was that there was a great deal of running and shouting and morphing of rules, and I tripped over my own feet several times. Still, it was the most fun I'd ever had. It was afternoon when school ended. Children of all ages filtered out to the front of the academy, some walking home, some waiting for parents to pick them up. All in all, it wasn't a bad first day, aside from the whole introductions thing. I'd met the Hokage, I was learning to be a ninja, I had friends, and wasn't that last bit just mind-boggling? Even so, there was one last thing that still bothered me. Over here, Dad, Tenten was yelling. I frowned. Tenten's father had already arrived. It was now or never. Tenten, I began, wondering how to phrase the question. I was wondering. I paused, then decided to be blunt. Are you a girl or a boy? What? Because I can't really tell, I said by way of explanation. I'm a girl. Tenten sounded offended, which puzzled me. Did she not like being a girl? That's okay, I'm a girl, too, I tried to say, but she had already flounced off to her father. Okay, that was strange. Was mentioning people's gender considered a social taboo? Or was it just a 6-year-old thing? Well, whatever it was, I was probably going to have to do some research. I'll ask Mom, I decided. Mom knows everything. There was surprisingly little reading to be done at the academy. While we did have a textbook, first-year academy students didn't use it very often. Most of the material was covered through Daikoku-sensei's lectures, a fact for which I was grateful, as I didn't much like to read. Still, there were moments when it was necessary. Such as now. Daikoku-sensei was absent today, ill, or something, and the substitute teacher, our TA, had ordered us to get out our textbooks and read the first chapter. Time to read, then. I flipped to the first page, took a deep breath, and reached inwards. Just like how Mom taught me. Focus. Inhale, exhale. Contract, relax. A few moments of nothing but the rhythm of breathing. Focus. And then clarity. Amazing clarity. Everyone's chakra had flared to life, shifting with every breath they took, every emotion or thought that swam through their minds. Among them, Tenten's was a comforting presence, all warm and cheerful and inquisitive, like a flitting sparrow. Focus. Concentrate, concentrate, gather and ferry the warmth, channel it down, down, down all the way to the fingertips. Carefully, now. Focus. A slight tingle as the pads of my fingers became hypersensitive. I could now feel the subtle fluctuations in heat, the tiny vibrations, each whoosh of lazily drifting air. I touched my fingers to the page and began to read. The areas with ink were smooth, areas with no ink was rougher, more textured. It was easy to tell the difference now that chakra was gathered in my fingertips, a process I was familiar with but still didn't really understand. It heightens your sensory nerves, Mom explained. I didn't know what sensory nerves were, but I smiled and pretended to know what she was talking about. I mean, if it was important, I'd find out later, right? It was in this manner that I managed to decipher the first sentence. Chakra is a basic form of energy that, to some extent, can be found within all living things. Well, that wasn't too bad. I moved on. It consists of a combination of physical and spiritual energy, and is considered one of the most widespread and fundamental tool a ninja will ever utilize. Reading was a painfully slow process, but Mom assured me that it would get better with time. I certainly hoped so. As of now, it was rather tedious. I struggled on. Physical energy is the energy contained within the cells in your body that actively sustains life. Since it is, as the name suggests, purely physical, this particular kind of energy can be bolstered through exercise and training. However, temporary enhancement through the use of stimulants is possible, if not potentially hazardous. See Figure 1.3. Among other specific characteristics, physical energy constitutes an essential portion of yang chakra. Conversely, yin chakra is composed almost entirely of the spiritual energy that governs the mind and soul. Keep in mind that this definition only touches upon the basics of chakra theory. Both yin and yang chakra will be covered much more thoroughly in Chapter 4. Yes, reading was tedious. And it didn't help that the passage was so twisty and convoluted. Oftentimes I would read one sentence, wonder what the heck I just read, and then have to reread it for clarification. It was beyond frustrating, and judging from the mood of my classmates, I wasn't the only one who felt this way. Psst, Mayo? Tenten. Was she done already? That was really fast. You're done? I said, incredulous. Huh. Oh, the reading. It wasn't too bad. Are you done too? What you doing? She said this all very fast. Like a hummingbird, darting from subject to subject. I'm still reading. Or I was. The instant my focus wavered, the tingling warmth had retreated and the clarity had vanished. But you're not even looking at the book, she insisted, and I could feel her curiosity rising. And you're rubbing the page. Slow blink. Confusion. Then the realization. Oh, right. She doesn't know. I faltered, unsure of what to say. Before starting at the academy, Mom had constantly warned me not to advertise my blindness once in school. She worried about people who wouldn't understand or people who would take advantage of my condition. Valid concerns, yes, but after 5 How to Deal with Bullies lectures it started to get redundant. Eventually I became a little peeved with her nagging, and had, with all the authority I could muster, informed her that I was already 6 years old and could take care of myself. Thank you very much. Now that I was confronting the problem, however, doubts began to gnaw at me. If I told her, would Tenten think I was too weird to hang around with anymore? Would she laugh at me, or tell me I was stupid and foolish? What if she didn't want to be friends anymore? Tenten poked my arm, startling me out of my frantic thoughts. Hey, are you still in there? Oh, what? You zoned out, she said, matter of fact, and I realized that I had. Students up and down the rows were beginning to chatter softly, as more and more people finished the reading assignment. Oh. I hesitated for a few seconds, rubbing my fingers, before blurting, it's how I read. There was a short pause. Then, huh? I'm blind, I said, and then suppressed a flinch at how blunt it sounded. Way to break it softly. You're blind, Tenten said slowly. I imagined she was frowning. You can't see? No. I held my breath, waiting for her verdict. My fingers pinched together, the ambient chattering was getting louder. And then finally. That's kind of cool, Tenten said just as I opened my mouth to defend myself. Wait, what? Ma? I said intelligently. Tenten seemed unfazed by my inability to speak coherently. Like you read with your hands, right? That's cool. Really cool. She poked my arm again. Thanks, I managed at last. In all the time I'd known her, though not long, admittedly, Tenten had always called me weird, or funny, or some other variant in the most good-natured, non-derogative way possible, of course, but still. I've been weird, I've been funny, I've been strange. But I've never been cool before. It was a nice feeling. Tenten poked my arm a third time, "You're spacing again," and this time, I grinned and poked her back. Naturally, it degenerated into an intense poking war of epic proportions. All the while, the reading assignment sat on the table, forgotten. Every few days we would have taijutsu practice. It was mostly stretches and physical conditioning at first, and then we moved on to basic kata. I wasn't good at taijutsu at all. My body was weak from years spent cooped up indoors, and it was a struggle just to keep up with everyone else. Some people, though, reveled in the physical exercise. I was paired up with such a person one day, when our teacher had us doing exercises with partners. And I think I can safely say that it was the most bizarre experience I've ever had. Oh, it was all pretty normal at first. But then the boy had walked up to me and said, "Hello, I am Rock Lee. What is your name?" And the world stopped making sense. Jumpsuits and glinting teeth and strange poses and sunsets and flames of youth. "Cammy," I said, with an odd sense of fascinated horror. "It is nice to meet you, Cammy," Rock Lee was saying, but the voice seemed far away. Rivals, and ridiculous promises and ridiculous self-imposed rules, carrying ridiculously large rocks like some strange, green, ridiculous mutant turtle. I was going crazy, heaven have mercy, and what the heck was green, anyway? Bowl cuts and springtimes and hugging, and oh god, those eyebrows. Eyebrows! I burst out, panicked. You, the sunsetan, and the turtly brows. In the silence that followed, I realized that I did not sound very sane. "Are you okay, Cammy?" Rock Lee asked. Vaguely, I wondered why he was calling me that. I'm fine, I said distractedly, still completely weirded out. What kind of freaky imagination did I have, to come up with something like that? Jumpsuits and bowl cuts? What the heck? No, need to stop thinking about it. Let's just start the eyebrows, forget about the exercise, I said, and then mentally smacked myself. Forget about the eyebrows. Start the exercise. So we started the exercises, and my partner was more enthusiastic about physical training than anyone had any right to be. But it did keep my mind off of mutant turtles and youthful eyebrows, so I was grateful. By the end of taijutsu practice, Rock Lee seemed to have forgotten about the entire thing. It was a while before he stopped calling me Cammy, though. We focused on a vast range of topics at the academy: chakra and ninjutsu theory, history, anatomy, mathematics and physics, government and law, health and first aid, geography, tactics and strategy, weaponry care. Quizzes and tests were a frequent occurrence. They were simple at first, but as the weeks passed the material became more challenging, and I began to falter. Studying was hard for me. I was slow at both reading and writing, and as a result note-taking was difficult and inefficient. Sometimes I considered asking Mom or Yoroi to help, but they were busy enough as it was, and I didn't like the idea of bothering them with my problems. When my grades began to dip, Daikoku-sensei pulled me over one day and gave me a recording device to use during lectures. I had not liked my sensei very much at first, as he tended to play favorites. Uchiha Hiroshi and Hyuga Niji in particular were often subject to vehement praise, but after using the recorder a few times, my grades rose again, and I decided that maybe Daikoku-sensei wasn't so bad after all. The days at the academy passed swiftly, and I soon settled into a routine. Morning, wake up, freshen up, breakfast, go to academy. Taijutsu in the morning if it was a taijutsu day, if not, then lecturing. Break time and lunch outside with Tenten and a group of others. Then, more lectures. Sometimes a test or a quiz. Go home, homework, study, dinner. Tend to the garden if I have free time, or play on my flute. Sometimes, on weekends, Tenten would invite me over to her house. I was nervous at first, but her parents were very kind and I eventually relaxed and started visiting more often. Plus, her mother cooked amazing food. It was almost nostalgic, for some reason, but that was strange because I've never eaten that kind of food before. Soon I began inviting Tenten to my home. It was easy getting permission. Mom was delighted I'd made a friend and wanted to meet her. When Tenten first came over, I showed her the garden, and our herb collection, and even my bamboo flute. And not that I was lonely before, of course I wasn't, but it was nice, having someone to share everything with. I imagined that this was what having a best friend was like. After a while, Mom finally became confident enough in my abilities to let me outside on my own. The newfound freedom was almost scary at first, but I quickly became used to it. Most often I would simply go to the nearest meadows and hills to gather herbs and flowers. There was always a large variety to choose from. The nice thing about Konoha was that its mild climate permitted the growth of many species of plants. Sometimes, a kunoichi class would wander in while I gathered plants. I myself did not sign up for the class. I was not interested in what it had to offer, and studying for the regular classes was tiring enough without having to worry about a supplemental one. The class headed by a lady named Suzum, I think, would scatter through the trees and hills, and pick flowers for ikebana. It was a bit uncomfortable with so many people around, but generally, I didn't bother them and they didn't bother me. And it wasn't like they came here a lot. Even when they did come, they usually stuck to the open hills, so I was free to plod alongside the small creek that trailed its way through the groves of trees. It was as I plodded along said creek one day, minding my own business and hunting for Medoru, that I met Shiho. Shiho had never liked mirrors. Or more precisely, not the mirrors themselves but what they reflected back at her. Then one day she decided to start wearing glasses, the ridiculous, swirled, opaque kind that no one in their right mind would wear, and mirrors suddenly became a lot more bearable. Not that the messy-haired freak that would stare back at her from the glass was much of an improvement, but whatever. At least this way, she could pretend to be semi-normal, right? It had been, in retrospect, a stupid thought. Because how on earth could a swirly four eyes with bird nest hair ever be considered even halfway normal? Normal people didn't wear ringed glasses when their vision was perfectly fine. Normal people didn't have a phobia of mirrors. Normal people didn't attract bullies like bees to nectar. Sort of like what was happening now, actually. What with the four girls stalking towards her with identical sneers on their faces and all. Shiho wasn't exactly sure who they were, or what their names were, which was kind of sad considering they were in the same class as her, but she recognized the hostile expressions and began to slowly back up along the bank of the stream. "Teacher's pet," girl number 1 said, oozing out the words like a slug oozes slime. "You think you're better than us, don't you?" Shiho took a step back and silently disagreed. No, she didn't. "You're a freak. Just a freak." This time she silently agreed. She was, yes she was. But they didn't have to rub it in. "Freaky little bug eyes," girl number 2 added. "What's with the glasses anyways?" Girl number 3 didn't say anything, just stepped up and swiped at Shiho's face, and Shiho, taken by surprise, let the glasses fall into the creek where the water carried it further and further away. "Oh wow, you are a freak," girl number 1 said, eyes wide. Shiho stared back at girl number 1's surprised brown eyes, at those perfectly normal brown eyes, and tried hard not to cry. "No wonder she wears glasses all the time, she looks like a vampire," girl number 3 whispered to girl number 4, who snickered. Girl number 2 was grinning. "Wait till we tell the others. They'll love this." She grabbed 2 of her companions' hands, girls number 3 and 4, and began to scurry away. Girl number 1 paused long enough to level Shiho a smug grin before leaving as well. All 4 were gone within seconds, and the clearing was quiet save for rustling trees and gurgling stream. For about a minute, Shiho just stood there. Then she shuffled over to the creek and began scanning the water for her glasses. The current must have carried them down further than she'd originally thought, because her glasses were nowhere in sight. For a brief moment she wondered what she'd do if they were lost forever. But no, she'd find them, because they just couldn't be lost. She needed those glasses, they protected her, and oh, what was she going to do? I think these are yours?" Shiho whipped around so fast she almost went flying into the creek. Standing there was a small girl she didn't recognize, drenched in water and looking more than a little lost. With a single water reed sticking out from her hair, and the algae plastered all over her clothes, she resembled an exotic species of alien. For a moment Shiho could do nothing but stare. Then she noticed a pair of circular glasses in the girl's hands. "Oh hi's," she said, relieved. The girl gave her a strange, vacant sort of smile and handed her the glasses, which were unfortunately also covered in algae. "Thank you," Shiho trailed off meaningfully, waiting for the girl to introduce herself. The social cue seemed to fly right over the girl's head, because instead of her name, she said, "I'm sorry about your glasses." "It's not your fault," Shiho said, automatically. The girl fidgeted with her fingers for a long while. "They were really mean," she said, sounding awkward. "Making fun of your eyesight like that." "Normal eyes, perfectly normal brown, not like hers." Shiho shuffled her feet and smoothed down her shirt. "It wasn't really my eyesight they were making fun of, to be honest." The girl tilted her head. "Then what?" "You can't tell?" No?" Shiho glanced down at the running water. In the patches of water that were clear of green muck, she could see her reflection, almost like a mirror. Red eyes? She quickly looked back up, jamming her glasses on as she did so. Algae and all. I'm ugly, she said. Didn't you hear them? I look like a vampire. The girl blinked slowly. Do you sparkle? The what? Shiho stopped, bewildered by the non sequitur. Do you sparkle? No, she said, wondering why she was even answering the question. No, I don't sparkle. Then you're not a vampire, the girl said, with an air of finality. Shiho had no idea how to respond to that, so she just nodded. An awkward silence soon descended, in which there was a lot of staring and twitching and fidgeting. I should probably get going, Shiho said, when the awkwardness level had reached danger zones. I still have to get the flowers for my Ikebana project. It was true, she hadn't even started yet. Suzume-sensei wasn't going to be very pleased at all. I can help, the girl offered, before looking uncertain. If you want me to. That is. It's okay if you don't. Do you? Shiho stared at the algae-covered alien girl and knew that if she accepted, she would never be considered normal again. Ever. For the rest of her life and eternity. Sure, she said. Bullying. It was a phenomenon I knew existed, but had never personally witnessed. Until now, that is. I wish I could say I'd charged into the clearing the instant I figured out what was going on, charged and blazing with righteous fury like how the heroes in the stories always did. I wish I could say I was brave and did the right thing, that I had the guts to climb out from behind the trees and defend that poor girl. I didn't. And so for the entire time I hid behind my tree like a frightened rabbit. When I heard that telltale thunk splash of an object dropping into water, it was almost a relief. It gave me something I could do, no matter how small it was. After a short but successful expedition in the creek, a meeting with the glasses girl, and a rather awkward conversation about vampires and Ikebana, I dragged said glasses girl off to a more secluded area. Several chakra signatures were approaching us, and I didn't want to face a crowd of bullies, after all. Later, as we sat on the hillside picking daisies and poppies and meadowrue, the glasses girl said, I didn't get a chance to ask earlier, but what's your name? Akademayo, I said, tucking a few blooms into the pouch I carried. I'm Yohi Shiho. Thanks for earlier, by the way. It was nothing. Which was true. It really was nothing compared to what I could have done, what I should have done. As we continued to collect flowers, I showed Shiho where she could find the best, healthiest blooms. She, in turn, fed me plenty of information about flowers that, surprisingly, I didn't know. Shiho, as it turned out, knew a lot about plants. Not the medicinal uses, like how Mom and I knew them, but little bits of miscellaneous information that I found interesting. She was like an encyclopedia. It was pretty amazing. Did you know, Shiho said, while I harvested a patch of poppies, that poppies symbolize remembrance? Remembrance for what? I asked, curious. Frankly? For people who've died. Poppies are some of the first flowers to grow after a big war, you see. Some people even say that the reason why they're so red is from all the blood spilled from the fighting. Okay, so sometimes her trivia was kind of morbid. Although to be fair, we lived in a ninja society, so I probably should have gotten used to things like this by now. Poppy seeds can help you sleep, I offered instead of commenting. Briefly, I wondered what red meant, but decided that if it had connotations to blood and war then I probably didn't want to know. Really? That's interesting. Actually, that reminds me, I think there was an old story about a lady who gets bewitched and turns into a poppy and... I listened as Shiho chattered on, and wondered how often she got to talk to people like this. How often she found anyone who'd actually sit and listen, and not laugh and call her a vampire. My finger trailed along the stem of a drooping daisy. It made me a little sad. Shiho wasn't in my class. I knew this because I got to school early this morning and examined everyone's chakra signature as they entered the classroom. None of them matched, leaving me disappointed and feeling vaguely like a stalker. But even if she wasn't in my class, I knew she'd be floating around somewhere during lunch, because everyone was let out during lunch. So after following Tenten and the others outside, I made a quick detour. Do you want to join us? I asked, when I found Shiho sitting alone by the far wall. For lunch, I mean. If you want. You don't have to, just but if you want. Yeah? Oh wow, very eloquent. I was in the middle of mentally smacking myself when Shiho saved me and said, sure. Ready. I grasped the handle of my kunai and concentrated. Aim. The target was an inanimate object void of chakra, a circular hole in space, a flat piece of nothing. With a bit of focus, I could pinpoint its location. Fire. A quick swipe of my arm, and the kunai was airborne. Whistle. Clang. Oh. That wasn't the right sound. If it had landed on the wooden target, it should have made a solid thud. It must have bounced off the metal frame, which meant. Miss, said Daikoku-sensei, sounding tired. That makes the score 2 out of 10. I wilted. 2 out of 10 was bad. Really bad. Next, Tenten, Daikoku-sensei said as I trudged off to retrieve the scattered kunai. Good luck, I said to Tenten when I got back. Thanks, she said, and then began hurling kunai. Whistle thud, whistle thud, whistle thud. Wow, I said quietly. She was done within 15 seconds. 15 seconds. It had taken me almost a minute, and I'd only hit 2 of the targets. Looks like it's 10 out of 10 for Tenten, Daikoku-sensei said, his tone jovial. It was a sharp contrast to how he talked to me. For some reason, that thought bothered me. Strange. Mayo. Did you see that? Tenten's voice cut through my thoughts. It was all excitement and giddiness and delight, and I couldn't help but smile. That was amazing, I said, and I meant it. Tenten turned out to be some kind of genius with kunai throwing. I, conversely, was a bit of a not genius. Meaning that I sucked. Clang. I winced at the noise. Another miss, then. You'll get it, Tenten encouraged, handing me another kunai. I hurled it at the target and promptly missed. Again. Here. Tenten offered me yet another kunai. Try throwing it a bit more to the left. More to the left? I hesitated, then flung the kunai, shifting my aim just a bit, and was awarded with a solid thud. Tenten's chakra flared up in excitement. Oh, way to go! I smiled, but it was a bit brittle. Her enthusiasm on my behalf was touching, it truly was, but I couldn't help but feel a bit disappointed that I couldn't figure it out on my own. We continued training in Tenten's backyard. I was too self-conscious to use the training field at the academy, and my own backyard had been off limits ever since the tomato fiasco, for a long while, occasionally switching off on who threw the kunai and who observed. Not that I had much to say about Tenten's technique when it was her turn. She was perfect. Okay, not perfect, exactly, but while she did make mistakes now and then, it was very, very rare. Not to mention that she was fast, and progressed quickly as well. Me, though? I flailed and struggled and trailed along at a snail's pace. Frustrating. It was just a difference in talent, I supposed. Although eyesight probably wouldn't have hurt. Bullseye! Tenten crowed. Great job, I said, mustering up a smile and pushing down a small twinge of bitterness. It wasn't Tenten's fault I was so talentless, she didn't deserve such petty resentment. Granted, after her 23rd bullseye, not that I was counting, or anything, I began to feel a bit discouraged. Tenten might have sensed this, because she abruptly stopped training and dragged me into the house for refreshments. Tired and grateful for the intervention, I didn't complain. Besides, her mother made amazing tea. Don't worry, Tenten told me as we sat around her dining table with cups of tea. I'm sure you'll get it soon. Thanks, Tenten, I said. The steam of the tea was warm and moist and nice smelling. Relaxing, I leaned down closer towards the teacup and enjoyed the warmth that bloomed across my face. Jasmine, my mind supplied. You just need practice, Tenten continued, and just like that, the discouraged feeling returned. Yes, I needed practice. Just a whole lot more practice than she did. Difference in talent. Something twisted in my stomach at the thought, something sharp and unpleasant, but it was small and easy to ignore. So ignore it I did. The stupid leaf keeps falling off, Tenten said. There was a rustling of clothes as she moved, presumably to retrieve her leaf. I didn't say anything in response, since I was a bit preoccupied with my own leaf, which was buzzing pleasantly on my forehead. No, really. That was like the bajillionth time. I was pretty sure that bajillion wasn't a word, but I doubted that Tenten would appreciate it if I voiced this thought. How do you do that? And her tone was just so incredulous that I couldn't resist. By focusing and not talking, I said. Naturally, my leaf chose that moment to fall off. To my left, I could hear Tenten unsuccessfully try to smother a laugh. I sent a glare in her general direction and then set about getting the leaf on my forehead again. I had to re-establish control. It had snapped when I had started talking, and so after retrieving my leaf, I reached inwards again. As the world sharpened into that familiar clarity, I noticed something semi-on hovering at the edge of my senses. Was that Rockley? It was. I scanned his position and frowned. What was he doing inside? Why wasn't he practicing chakra control out here, with everyone else? I eased out of focus. The clarity dimmed. The leaf fluttered down into my hands. Turning to Tenten, I asked, "Why isn't Rockley here?" "Rockley?" Tenten repeated. She sounded confused, which was understandable. Ever since the eyebrow incident, I'd been avoiding Lee like the plague. To suddenly ask about him was a bit random. "Yes," I confirmed. Before Tenten could reply, someone else butted into the conversation. "You mean you don't know?" said Uchiha Hiroshi, who seemed to be balancing the leaf and talking at the same time, a feat that I could not replicate. I allowed myself a brief moment of envy before saying, "No, I don't." "Gee, talk about clueless." "Shut up, Uchiha," Tenten suggested, before addressing me. "Rockley isn't at our level yet. He was having trouble, and was slowing down the class and stuff, so Daikoku-sensei got him a tutor to teach him separately. It was a few weeks ago, but I guess you don't remember." I frowned as I processed the information. "He's not at our level? What do you mean?" Surely he couldn't be that far behind? We were still only at the channeling chakra stage. Anything below that was meditation stuff. The becoming aware of chakra stuff. "It means that his chakra control sucks," said Uchiha Hiroshi, who had evidently not taken Tenten's advice. "That he's got zero talent for ninjutsu or genjutsu. Kind of like how you are with taijutsu, actually." "Shut up, Uchiha," Tenten snapped. "It's the truth. Everyone knows how bad she is, even Lee can beat her in a spar." "I don't need to hear this." In one abrupt movement, I stood up. "I need to use the bathroom," I said, maybe a bit louder than necessary. As I headed indoors, almost stumbling in my hurry, two words kept replaying in my head. Zero. Talent. We only really needed to learn how to handle kunai and shuriken to pass our exams, but Daikoku-sensei insisted that it was good to be exposed, at least a little bit, to the more obscure kinds of ninja weapons out there. That was why, near the end of my second year, he invited a weapons specialist over as a sort of guest presentation. "My name is Tanaka Kenji," the weapons specialist said in a warm, friendly voice. He then proceeded to highlight various ways to kill people and the most efficient means of doing it. When he finished his little presentation, he brought out about 80 different weapons and invited us to explore his arsenal. We all pressed forward with varying degrees of eagerness, ranging from crazed euphoria, Tenten, to quiet reluctance, me. In my examination of the weaponry laid out for us, I found that I didn't much care for saban, or needles in general. They were thin and hard for me to detect, and when they flew through the air there was barely a whisper of sound. I didn't like the idea of not knowing where I'd thrown a weapon, or worse, not knowing if a weapon was coming at me. Then there were the fakibari, which were tiny needles people could shoot from their mouths. Tanaka Kenji explained that they were good for taking the opponent by surprise, but I couldn't imagine ever using them. The idea of hiding needles in my mouth was kind of horrifying. I did find a few of the weapons to be interesting, though. The kakute, for one, was nice in that it was both easy to use and easy to hide. It was basically a spiked metal ring, worn on either the inside or outside of the hand. Oftentimes the tips would be smeared with poison for greater effect. The fan was another interesting weapon. Because of its versatility, the weapon was simultaneously a bludgeon, a shield, and a skewer. When closed, it was solid and thick and heavy. When open, it could fend off projectiles, and pierce things with its sharpened points. "You like the Tessen?" Tenten asked. I paused in my inspection of the fan. "The what?" "Tessen. Iron fan. The thing you're holding?" "Oh, so that's what it was called." "If you like it, I can maybe get you one," said Tenten. "I'm sure Uncle has a couple extra I could ask him." "It's okay," I said hastily. I don't think I'd be very good with it, anyway. And I didn't really want any more favors from her, not when she'd already done so much. Tenten, however, was unrelenting. "How would you know that? You haven't even tried yet." I frowned. "I'm not good with weapons." "Projectile weapons," she corrected. "This is different." "I'm not good with weapons. Any weapon." "But you can get better, right?" "Don't be naive." I blinked. For a second I thought it was Tenten speaking, but the voice was quieter. Steelier. I thought for a few seconds and then recognized it as Hyuga Niji, the soft-spoken genius who sat at the back of the classroom. Excuse me? Said Tenten. One cannot just get better, Niji said, emanating subtle disdain. Oh yeah? And why not? There was a challenge rising in her voice, and I tried not to wince. She could get pretty competitive. Niji, though, seemed unfazed. If she is so terribly untalented at handling weaponry, then any amount of practice is unlikely to change it. Something inside me died a little at that statement. Slowly, I put down the fan. That's ridiculous, Tenten said. It's the truth. Ridiculous and stupid. It is not. You're stupid. And you're childish. People don't change. I believe they do. Rock Lee cut in, almost scaring me to death because, really, where the heck did he come from? You are even worse, Niji informed Lee. A ninja who cannot use ninjutsu. Why are you even here? I have taijutsu, Lee insisted. I can still be a ninja. And you are wrong, a person can change. And then Niji began listing out every reason why Lee was wrong, and Tenten was countering every one of his statements with an acid remark, and Lee was punctuating the entire argument with dramatic declarations and exclamation marks. And me? I was just standing there, and wondering how the tests and conversation had mutated into a heated philosophical debate about the human condition, when all of a sudden, I was hit with the most unsettling feeling. An intense feeling of wrongness. Of perversion. Of unbelonging. If that was a word. What a jerk, Tenten seethed, as she grabbed my arm and led me away. Come on, let's get away from you, alright? At her concerned tone, I snapped out of my thoughts. Yeah, it's just that. It's just that for a moment. What's wrong? Never mind. It's nothing. If you say so, she said, sounding rather unconvinced. Then, in a lighter tone, let's go see some of the other stuff, huh? We continued to explore, but I couldn't concentrate. My mind kept straying back to that moment, to that unfinished thought. It's just that, for a moment, I had the strangest feeling. A heavy conviction that I wasn't supposed to be there. After that, I stopped sitting with Tenten and the others during lunch. Instead, I hid under an old oak tree by the far wall, near Shiho's old spot. I don't know why, but sitting with the others just didn't feel right anymore. A few days passed, and then Shiho found me. What are you doing here? I asked. Shiho ignored me. I heard her moving, scraping aside fallen leaves. Then she plopped down to sit next to me. Shiho? Hi, she said. I stabbed a dumpling with my chopsticks. What are you doing here? I asked again. Sitting, she said, which totally wasn't what I meant. I mean, shouldn't you be with the others? Why should I? They're your friends, aren't they? There was a brief, contemplative silence, and then she said, Well, you were my friend first. At those words, something inside me swelled up, like a balloon. I poked at a dumpling, then tried to say something, but found that I couldn't. The balloon had somehow taken over my throat, so that it was all thick and closed up. After a length of silence, Shiho spoke up again. The oak tree represents strength and endurance. Oh, I recognize this game. Oak bark can be used to treat fungal skin infections, I replied, forcing the words past the balloon in my throat. It came out sounding like a croak. Oak leaves symbolize rank and status. Oak leaf tea can help heal cuts and scrapes. An acorn is a symbol of good luck. Acorns can give you constipation. Shiho giggled and I smiled a bit. From there on, a tentative conversation began to pick up, and by the end of lunchtime we were laughing and talking like nothing was wrong. You're avoiding me. Her voice was accusing, upset, hurt. I flinched but didn't say anything. You never sit with us anymore. You ignore me during class. And whenever I try to invite you over, you're always busy. She took a deep breath. Why are you avoiding me? I didn't respond. Partly because I wasn't entirely sure myself, and partly because it doesn't feel right was kind of a lame response. Is it because of the Niji thing? I don't think that stuff about you, honest I don't. My hands twisted together as I tried to figure out what to say. Mayo? It's hard to explain, I finally mumbled. Why? Was it me? Did I do something wrong? Why, indeed? I lowered my head and thought about it, really thought about it. That one time Tanaka Kenji came over, why did I feel so unwelcome? Like a stranger? An intruder? It certainly wasn't anything Tenten did. She never did anything wrong. So that meant the problem was me. Now that I look back, Tenten was always looking out for me. I suppose I was a bit resentful that I needed so much help. Maybe a little jealous, too, that she was so good at everything. It made me feel disgusted with myself. She was my friend, and darn it, friends weren't supposed to be jealous of each other, friends weren't supposed to be resentful. Friends helped each other, supported each other, grew up side by side. But here we were, and it was all wrong. Tenten was the flower in the sun, and I was the intruder, the unwanted weed, the parasite that fed off of her brilliance. I was a terrible friend. No, I said. It wasn't you. Tenten waited, probably for a more informative answer, but I refused to say anything else. Finally, she sighed and left. In the days that followed, Tenten would often try again to get me to talk, or offer invitations to come over to her house. I kept turning them down, though, and they lessened over time. Eventually, the attempts stopped altogether. And well, it was sad, but that was the way our friendship ended. Not with a bang but a whimper. Death was a frequent visitor in the lives of ninja. As a medic who worked at a hospital, Akita Ran was rather well acquainted with this concept. They lost patients all the time in her line of work, after all, and getting worked up over every death would have driven her insane. She didn't exactly like it, but had inevitably learned to deal with it. Besides, Ran had lived through multiple wars as well as a Bijou attack. She was familiar with death and its horrors. The Uchiha massacre, however, was a special brand of horrifying. She supposed that part of the reason was how senseless it was. Children and adults, ninja and civilians alike, all slaughtered without discrimination. Systematic, dispassionate, merciless. Like a machine. Even worse was the identity of the murderer. Uchiha Itachi. She didn't believe it at first, when she heard the news. Not him, not Itachi. Not that nice, quiet boy whose arm she once helped patch up after a mission. She remembered that incident very clearly. He had apologized for the inconvenience, and thanked her for her help, and she remembered feeling charmed by his solemn politeness, remembered thinking what a nice young man, and then he went insane and killed his family. It was just so upsetting. Ran sighed and polished her glasses, feeling very tired as she walked down the hospital corridor. In light of recent events, she'd been transferred to the autopsy unit. It was grim, exhausting work, but since they were running low on personnel, she didn't complain. Still, she much preferred working in the greenhouse, under the pharmacy division. It was certainly less depressing, and there weren't so many bodies. Ran turned the corner, still absently polishing her glasses, when her nearsighted vision caught a flash of gray, and the next thing she knew, something had collided into her, and the glasses had flown out of her hands. "Oh, I'm so sorry," said the gray blur, his voice apologetic. "Here, allow me." He bent down and retrieved the glasses, then handed them over. Ran smiled her thanks and put the eyeglasses back on. The blur sharpened into the form of a boy with gray hair and a self-deprecating smile. "Thank you," Ran said. "I apologize, I should have been paying more attention. I do tend to drift off sometimes, you'll have to forgive me." "No, it was my fault," the boy said, still smiling. "I couldn't blame you. You weren't wearing your glasses, after all." "I suppose I wasn't," Ran said agreeably. She studied the boy, noting the hospital uniform he wore and the clipboard under his arm. "Are you new here? I've never seen you before." The boy nodded, dipping his head. "Yakushi Kabuto, trainee. Pleased to make your acquaintance." "Yakushi Kabuto, Yakushi." "Yakushi?" Ren blinked and studied the boy more closely. Now that she knew what to look for, she could see a bit of a resemblance in the shape of his face, the friendly smile, the unassuming demeanor. Even the glasses were exactly the same. "Likewise, Kabuto-kun," she said. "Tell me, would you happen to be related to Yakushi Nono?" Kabuto appeared taken aback for a moment. "Yes, in fact. Yes. Do you know her?" "I served under her before she retired." Ran smiled, then added, "She is a good friend of mine." The trainee nodded, looking a bit uncomfortable. "How is she? Is she doing well?" "I'm afraid I don't know. I haven't seen her in a long time, you see." There was something strange in his voice. "Oh, of course," said Ran, wondering at that. Perhaps they weren't close, or his relationship with her was strained. It was possible. She studied the boy again, observing the tense grip on the clipboard clutched close to his chest, the slightly hunched back, the downturned head, the averted eyes. It was subtle, but their ad defensive posture. Defense against what, exactly, Ran was unsure of. And then Kabuto drew himself up, perfectly relaxed, mild expression firmly back in place, and it was like the previously defensive-looking boy had never existed. "I'm sorry," he said. "It's been a pleasure speaking with you, but I still have a lot of work to do." "It's no problem," Ran assured him, to which he responded with a slight smile. They exchanged a few more pleasantries before Kabuto left to continue his work, and Ran continued her way down the corridor, deep in thought. Yakushi Kabuto really was such a nice young man. He was just like Nono, so polite and unassuming it reminded her a bit of Uchiha Itachi, actually, or at least the Itachi from before. The massacre. Her steps faltered as a wave of fatigue tumbled over her, and she suddenly remembered the reason why she was so very tired. Ran rubbed her forehead wearily, and wondered for a moment what her old captain would have done in this situation. Nono, ex-captain of the Konoha Medic Corps, had always been calm, unflappable, really, and it was part of what made her such an admirable leader. Ran remembered how, in the old days, she'd always pay Nono a visit whenever she was upset. A peaceful day of chatting and tea had never failed to cheer her up. Ran massaged her temples again and sighed. She could really use some cheering up at the moment. Perhaps I should visit her again, she thought. She hadn't visited the orphanage in such a long time. Well, she'd meant to, of course, but she'd been so busy. Mayo was born, and then there was the QB attack, and now this massacre, and before she knew it 9 years had passed. 9 years, without dropping by even once. It made her feel a bit guilty. I'll visit her, she promised herself as she left the hospital. After all this is over, I'll visit her. It was too sudden. There were nightmares, that night, mass of heat gone cold, too cold, ice cold, couldn't breathe, voices falling silent, never answering, and I strained to listen, I had to hear but I couldn't, haunting melodies that cut off, ended much too soon, tried to remember but they left me alone in the dark and never ever came back. It was terrible, fitful, broken sleep. It was the only warning I had. Before crawling out of bed the next day and dragging myself to school and finding out he was gone, and it was too sudden. To be honest, I had never liked Uchiha Hiroshi. He was mean, and haughty, and rarely had anything nice to say to anybody, much less me. There were some days when I happily fantasized about punching him in the nose. Only, I hadn't ever wanted for him to die. Broken nose, yes. But never die. It was just too sudden. It was around this time, shortly after the massacre, that I began to notice them. The insects. Blurry little pinpricks, tiny and warm. They were everywhere. I didn't like them. Didn't like the way they'd glow with life only to fizzle into nothing. Didn't like the way they'd extinguish like a candle flame snuffed out, or the way it made me feel cold, like someone had taken my heart and painted it over with ice. At the academy, there were a few kids whose bodies were full of the tiny, buzzing, flickering things. Maybe it was unfair of me, but I stayed far, far away from them. It wasn't that the insects repulsed me, or even the fact that they seemed to be living inside of people. It was that they just kept dying. Incoming from the left. Quick dodge, spin back to gain better position, aim, jab. Block. Okay, so he must have anticipated that. Back up, don't want to get hit, and why is he so fast? That is so not fair. Ouch. I hit the ground and skidded, killing several ants in the process. But there was no time to be horrified, no time to things coming quick. Hurry up and regain footing, hurry. My arms flailed, feet scrambled to get up, and then he was there, and his leg, no arm? No, leg was crashing down, and I tried to roll away, but there was no time. The next thing I knew, I was flat on my back, breathless, with a ringing headache. A few of my classmates were cheering on the sidelines, yelling things akin to Yaguraku won. And wow, he totally kicked her butt. Statements which, to be fair, were true, but did they really have to state the obvious? Yagura didn't seem much more pleased with the cheering than I was, if his chakra was any indication. But then again, he seemed the type that was never much pleased with anything. Gruff and sour, like a dried-up lemon. You gonna lie there all day? Said Yagura the lemon, and I belatedly realized that his hand was extended outwards in a gesture of impatient courtesy. Oh, thanks, I said, letting him help me up. And then, because I had no idea what else to say, good fight. That was a lie. It was not a good fight. Yagura just snorted and walked back to the sidelines. I wondered whether or not I should take offense, but in the end decided not to. Sparring had tired me out, and getting angry was just too much work at the moment. Dog. Boar. Ram. Call forth chakra from deep inside, build it up, visualize, let the seals direct and mold, twist and shape. Transformation. I heard the telltale poof of smoke. Felt chakra cloak my body, mimicking the shape and form of my teacher. Held my breath. Awaited judgment. I'm sorry, Daikoku-sensei began, and at those words I deflated. Failed again. No. My hands twitched back into the dog's seal, left palm over curled fist. Try again. I had to try again. Dog, boar, ram. Poof. Did I get it? Myo. That's a no, then. One more time. A hand landed on my shoulder, and I paused in the middle of the boar seal. I'm sorry, Myo, but I don't think this is going to work, Daikoku-sensei said. You need proper visualization for a successful transformation, he added pointedly. Visualization. Right. So that was two techniques I couldn't do, clones, or at least illusionary ones, also required visualization to work. My shoulders slumped. How am I going to graduate? If I can't do this. You don't need to know the transformation jutsu to graduate, Daikoku-sensei said firmly. Failing the ninjutsu portion won't automatically fail you. He patted my shoulder. Work hard in other areas. You can still pass. Yes, sensei, I said, but I couldn't help but feel doubtful. Could I do it? Could I graduate? For the first time, I wasn't sure. So far I hadn't proved to be very good at anything, really except for maybe chakra control. But what use was that when I couldn't even do any of the techniques? I sighed. Maybe I just wasn't cut out to be a ninja. More and more often, I found myself seeking refuge in music. Whenever I had a bad day, which was depressingly frequent, I'd make a beeline for my flute, lock myself in my room, and then dive into the music. There was something pleasant about playing the familiar but not tunes, something wistfully sweet that seldom failed to soothe my nerves. This time, though, not even the music could erase the niggling doubt in my mind. I was sitting on the old, gnarled bamboo mat fingering my flute, and unsure of what to do, when I heard the front door open and felt a familiar presence enter the house. Mom, I thought in relief. Lately, she'd taken to going out of town visiting an old friend. I think so it was rare that she'd be home at this hour. Whatever the reason she was back, I was grateful after the fruitless endeavors of the past week or so. I really needed someone to talk to. I charged out into the front hall. Mom! My oof, she said, as I barreled into her. There was a sort of panicked rustling, and I could tell that she was trying not to drop her bag. Mayo-chan? I mumbled something incoherent to her stomach. Mom must have sensed my distress because she sighed and put down her bag with a rustle thunk. Let's go make some tea. We ended up brewing lavender tea, which I suspected was due to its stress-relieving properties. Sure enough, something about the delicate floral scent was very relaxing and I felt myself slowly beginning to unwind. The two of us sat in silence, sipping at our teacups. My mother, ever patient, seemed content to wait for me to begin talking. I killed some ants today, I began, a bit inanely. I didn't mean to. It was an accident. Mom said, but didn't say anything else. She was still waiting. After a few minutes I sighed and crumpled. Mom, what if I can't graduate? I'm sure you can if you work hard, she said serenely. You've still quite a lot of time. I flicked at my teacup, listening to it rattle in its saucer. Another 5 minutes passed before I spoke up again. Maybe, but I'm not very good at anything. I'm never going to be like you or Yoren Ai-san. Never is a strong word, was her mild reply. Do you really think that I'd always been like this? I was rather clumsy as well, when I was your age. You were? I frowned. It was difficult imagining Mom as a little girl. She'd always been so calm and strong and self-assured. It was like she'd sprung into being that way. But you're so strong. Mighty oaks from little acorns grow, Mom said, and something about that phrase sounded familiar. A quote? Maybe. I know I'd heard it somewhere before. It didn't matter. It wasn't the point. Okay, I said, but what if I still can't? I'm just not what if I can't after everything you helped and I don't want. I stopped, frustrated. I'd never been very good with words. They always tended to desert me in the moments I needed them the most, It was like everything got tangled up on the way down from my brain to my mouth and came out as one big clunky jumble. Fortunately, Mom being Mom seemed to have no trouble translating my garbled mess. "Oh," she sighed, "is that what this is about?" The chair scraped as she stood up and came over to hug me. "Silly, I don't care if you become a ninja or not," she said, and her voice was comforting and soft, like downy feathers. "Really?" I asked, and I knew I was being stupid. Of course she didn't care. She wasn't the one who insisted I become a ninja, but she'd worked so hard, spent so much time helping me, been so supportive, and I was terribly, terribly afraid of disappointing her. "Really?" she said. "So if I don't pacify," I kept stumbling over my words, but Mom seemed to understand. "No matter what happens, you'll always be my little acorn," she said, hugging me again. "And I'm sure you'll be beautiful no matter what direction you choose to grow in." I choked down my clumsy words and hugged her back, feeling better than I've had in ages. Mom was being called out for a mission. I wanted for her to stay, especially with Yoroi absent on his own mission, but I knew that it was a childish desire, so I squashed the notion. "I'll be back soon," Mom said, patting my head. "Take care of your brother when he gets back, okay? Goodness knows he needs to eat more vegetables." "Okay," I said, still a bit glum. Mom squeezed my hand. "When I get back, I'll buy a little something for us. Lavender?" "Okay," I said again, feeling a little lighter. I liked lavender. "All right. Lavender it is, then." She patted my head one more time, and then was gone. And I was alone again. My brother came back from his mission, and I was very glad to see him. Not that I'd been lonely or anything. Really. I was just glad I wasn't by myself anymore. That evening, he helped me make dinner. We were in the middle of boiling noodles when I remembered Mom's request and began shoving vegetables and other things inside the pot. I made especially sure to add a lot of tomatoes. Yoroi hated tomatoes. "I hate tomatoes," my brother complained. I grinned. "Was this before or after the tomato incident?" "The tomato incident? What, you still remember that? That was years ago." "I'm an elephant," I told him seriously, and then poured in another dozen tomato slices. I mashed the stuff around with a chopstick so he wouldn't be able to just pluck them out later. "Well, whatever, Miss Elephant," he sniffed. "I'll have you know that I've hated tomatoes for my entire life. The incident was just further proof that they're evil vegetables." "Fruit," I corrected absently, feeling around the pot with my chopstick. There was barely any resistance. The mass of tomatoes was a squishy pulp now. Perfect. Time to serve the soup. "There are more tomatoes than noodles now," Yoroi said in dismay as I poured the finished soup into 2 bowls. "More tomatoes than soup. This isn't tomato noodle soup anymore, this is noodle soup tomato." I beamed. "Yep. Isn't that great? You're evil, you know." "Love you too, and I-san." We settled around the dining table, and Yoroi, when he'd finished grumbling about tomatoes, asked me about school. "We just finished a survival exercise a few days ago," I said. 1 week. In the forest. No supplies. "All right. So how did it go?" "It went okay. I caught a squirrel." My brother paused. "One squirrel? That's it?" "Yeah." Another incredulous pause. "How the heck did you survive for a week out there?" "Foraging," I said. "Lots of stuff out there. Berries, fruits, nuts, mushrooms." And I hesitated and lowered my voice. "I don't really like killing." Mayo," Yoroi said, his voice heavy with emphasis, "you're going to be a ninja." I frowned. "So I have to like killing things to be a ninja?" "That's not what I meant." He sighed. "You know, if you can't bring yourself to kill a squirrel." But I did kill the squirrel. After what, 6 days? I was. A knock on the door interrupted our argument. I blinked and closed my mouth, then concentrated on feeling out the unfamiliar presence. There was a Mani was pretty sure it was a man at our door, and his chakra was too refined, too powerful to be a civilian's. "It's a ninja," I said, with a vague sense of foreboding. The man's chakra felt grim. Cold. Resigned. I didn't like it. "I'll get it," Yora said, getting up. After a moment, I followed him. We reached the front door. My brother opened it, and made a noise of surprise. "Oh, hello, Takashi-sensei. What brings you here?" The man's chakra went colder. I tensed and huddled closer to my brother, not sure what to expect, but knowing it wasn't anything good. Hello, Yorakuen, the man takes shade. Do you mind if? Sure, come in. We were just having dinner, I hope you don't mind noodle soup tomato? That won't be necessary, Takashi said, unfazed by my brother's strange phrasing. I won't be staying long. We led him to the living room where the chairs were comfier and more suited to accommodate guests. Yoroi waited until everyone was seated before saying, So what brings you here, Takashi-sensei? It's your mother, Takashi said quietly. I felt a jolt of fear. Next to me, Yoroi went deathly still. What happened? He asked. Takashi sighed. Her mission did not go very well. Something wild and scared was building up inside me and I struggled to push it down, but it was like trying to stop a giant boulder from rolling down a slope. I'm sorry, Takashi said, but I'm afraid. He trailed off, as if reluctant to go on, and I was teetering on the edge of a cliff and the boulder was still rolling down, 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 and then he forced himself to continue. I'm afraid that she won't be coming back. And the boulder fell. Mother had left a long time ago. He didn't remember her, he'd been too young. It was okay though, because the adults here were very nice even if they frowned and worried a lot. It was okay because he was happy here, at the orphanage. One day, a lady visited them. She said she was here to see Mother, but of course Mother wasn't here anymore. Everyone knew that. Silly lady. Still, she looked confused and upset, so to be nice he drew her a picture of a bluebird. He thought it was fitting, because bluebirds represented happiness, at least, that's what the old man said. In any case, she was pleased with the picture, and told him that he was a very good artist. It made him glow with pride, and it was at that moment when, to him, the silly lady became the nice lady. The nice lady visited again the next Sunday. At first all she did were boring things, like talking to the adults and asking them lots of questions. He thought it was awful that someone so nice should be so dull, and so, in an effort to help her become more interesting, he decided to draw her some more pictures. It must have worked, because after that she began to pay more attention to the children. She also began bringing them food and flowers, and telling stories to the children, and fixing anyone and everyone who got hurt. Sundays quickly became a day to look forward to so much that he had a pretty little picture prepared for her every week in anticipation to her visit. He liked showing her his sketches, because it made her smile, and he liked her smile. It was calm and gentle and made him feel all warm and fuzzy inside. It continued like this for a while. Short little Sunday visits, flowers, stories, weekly sketches. Then, rather abruptly, she stopped visiting. He waited. Of course they all did, but she never came back. Which was a shame, because he'd worked quite hard on that week's drawing and now he'd never get to show her. Not long after the nice lady stopped visiting, the Cyclops came. The adults didn't like the Cyclops very much. They yelled at him and called him bad names, but in the end, the adults fell quiet and disappeared. The orphanage emptied. The children followed the Cyclops into the ground. Everything was a bit of a blur after that. They began teaching him, telling him how to act and behave, showing him how to become a better person. Following their instructions, he soon learned that things like emotions and personality, and friends were very bad. So he hollowed himself out and got rid of them. After that, things grew even fuzzier. He felt as if the world had dulled into monotone, blurred into smears of gray, shifted out of focus, become something strange and empty and thin. Sometimes he'd sit down and try to sketch out a scene from his past, of the orphanage and the people who lived there. He couldn't. Their faces, he didn't remember any of it. All he knew now was the underground and the masks and the darkness. Everything else was so hard to remember. Eventually, the day came when he realized that he couldn't even recall his own name, and he wondered if, perhaps, this was what it felt like to be. Absolutely nothing at all. Multitudes of soft, warm voices, and woven throughout it all was a familiar, heady floral scent. And then all of a sudden everyone was leaving and there was nothing I could. Hay vanished one by one, leaving behind nothing but a final, lingering trace of lavender. I started awake, heart pounding, eyes horrifyingly damp. There was one frantic moment when I wasn't sure who or where I was, and then it all came crashing back. Alone. I was alone, by myself, left behind, with nothing but shadowy thoughts for company. Feeling sick, I stumbled out of bed, dragging the tangled blanket along with me. The night was cold and unfriendly, and I didn't want to brave it all alone. I found him outside, huddled on the front step, like he was waiting for someone. Without saying a word, I settled down next to him. Emoto-chan, my brother said, voice creaking like a rusted hinge. He sounded tired and hoarse, and I knew he hadn't been sleeping any better than I had. I shivered, the air was chilly. Carefully, I draped my blanket over the both of us. You should be inside, he said. In bed. I didn't answer, just burrowed deeper into his side. Relished the company, and the warmth, and the fact that he was real and he was there. I'm not going to leave, you know, he said, perhaps guessing the direction of my thoughts. Promise? I asked, and it was the QB attack all over again. Only this time, nobody was coming back. I promise, he said, and I relaxed enough to stop crying. We spent the night on that front step, cocooned in a ragged old blanket. The cloth of the blanket was thin and gave little protection from the night air. I didn't care, though, because my brother was still here, and not leaving. And that knowledge warmed me in a way that a blanket never could. Mayo? I didn't answer. It seemed to make her nervous. I can leave if you think I'm intruding. Go honestly, what am I saying? Of course you think I'm intruding. Funny how she stuttered. She usually never did. I'll just, go then. I mean, if you need me, I'll be. I wanted flowers, I said quietly. Shiho froze mid-retreat. Several seconds passed before she asked cautiously. Did you want anything in particular? I plucked off a nearby flower in response. Poppy. Oh, she said, sounding subdued. I'll help. We picked the quiet, sleepy poppies together in silence. It was a familiar rhythm, picking flowers with Shiho. Calming. Relaxing. I could almost forget. Almost. I set the basket of flowers down in front of the memorial. Then I laid a hand on the stone, tracing the carefully engraved characters. Dad. Mom. At least they were together, now. I brought flowers, I said to the stone. Lavender, since you couldn't get them yourself. There was no reply, which was no surprise. I wasn't sure why I had expected one. Poppies, too. Shiho says they stand for remembrance, so. My voice wobbled dangerously and I had to take a moment to compose myself. So I'm saying that I won't ever forget what you said, and that I'll make you proud. Grow into something you'll be proud of. So awkward, these words. And yet sincere. I meant every single one of them. I stood in melancholy silence for a long while before turning around to leave. Behind me I could feel the lavender fluttering, and the poppies twitching in the wind. Small and ponderous and sad. In Flanders fields the poppies blow, came the strange, unbidden thought. I shook it off, too tired to wonder what it meant, and continued on my way home. I blew. Reedy notes tumbled out, thin and dry. Nothing. Shifting my fingers, I blew again. Just nothing. For a long time I just sat there, frowning. Something was missing, something vital, but I didn't know what. A few more vain attempts. Still nothing. I can't do this, was my last thought before I gave up and put the flute away. These days I drifted through school in a strange combination of determination and apathy. Determination to get better, apathy in everything else. It felt weirdly hollow, like I was a ghost whose only anchor to the world was the desperate need to improve. That need became my defining trait, my lifeline, something real and solid I could cling to, something doubly necessary in a competitive environment like the academy. Because now, it was no longer about learning the subjects, it was about conquering them. Nothing much mattered anymore, but the struggle to fight the win. The days wore on and soon settled into a mechanical sort of routine. During class, I would devote my entire attention to lessons, be they theoretical or practical, mental or physical. After class, I'd head into the academy training grounds and attack the training posts until I collapsed. The physical exercise was painful, tiring, mindless, not to mention that my growth and strength seemed to crawl at an achingly slow pace, but I forced myself to continue, because it was the only way I knew to become stronger. A spar. I was in a spar, against a classmate. A boy named Shinta. Turn. Feint. Kick. Shinta was one of those tall, spindly types who were annoyingly fast and hard to keep track of in a fight. I could keep up with him barely for all of 30 seconds before I began to tire. Block. Duck. Dodge. I was purely on the defensive now, struggling to anticipate my opponent's moves. My mind was keeping up a steady litany of don't get hit, but I was slipping, and it wouldn't be long now, wouldn't be long until I'd make a mistake, lose all control of the fight. And there it was. I left an opening. He took it. The ground was grainy, dusty, rough. I hit it hard, felt the incoming sweep of limbs, and knew it was over. I grit my teeth. No. I didn't want it to end like this, like it did 1,000 times before, like it always did. I couldn't let it end like this. Not if I wanted to change. My fingers curled. Almost unconsciously, I judged the distance and direction, then without really thinking I aimed and threw. He yelped and faltered as the dirt hit his face. As I rolled away, I spared a split second to marvel at the larger-than-anticipated reaction. I'd forgotten how dependent most people were on their eyes, and then a second had passed, and I was behind my opponent and back on my feet. Not about to give him any more time to recover, I directed a vicious kick at the back of his knee, causing him to stumble and lose his footing. And that was all I needed. I was on top of him in an instant, fist poised above his neck. He froze. "I win," I said quietly. For a few seconds, no one said anything. Then Shinta broke the shocked silence. "You cheated," he said, voice tinged with disbelief. I blinked. "Sorry." "A lie. I wasn't." "You cheated," Shinta repeated, sounding a touch angrier, a touch more accusing. This time I didn't reply, just got off and awkwardly offered a hand. It felt strange to do so, since usually I was the one being helped up after fights. I vaguely wondered if I was doing it right. It didn't matter, as it turned out. Shinta got up by himself, ignoring my proffered hand altogether. We walked back to the sidelines, him stewing in silent anger all the way. While I was a bit abashed by his obvious irritation, I was ultimately unrepentant over the bout of dirty fighting. It was necessary, after all. Because right now, although my taijutsu was certainly improving, I could tell it wouldn't ever be great. No, I had to find another way, a more reliable way to win my fights. And if being sneaky was the trick, then so be it. The garden was falling into disarray. Which was understandable. Really, it wasn't as if my brother had the inclination or necessary skill to tend to it. As for me, I simply didn't want. No, simply didn't have the time. Yes, that was right. With all my efforts pinned on the goal of getting better, I just didn't have time to care for the plants anymore. That was it. It had nothing at all to do with the horribly familiar flowers and scents, or the wonderful, terrible memories that accompanied them. After years of witnessing Goff feeling things die, one would think that it would get easier. It didn't. "What are you waiting for?" Niji demanded. He was, unfortunately, my partner for this survival exercise. So far, he hadn't said anything derogative yet. On the contrary, he'd been nothing but painfully formal. Nonetheless, I sensed that the strained civility between us was quickly drawing to a close. My grip on the kunai tightened. The rabbit had been caught in the trap Niji had set up, but it was still alive, still vibrant. It was thrashing inside the tangled wire, chakra fluttering in a sort of wild, instinctive fear. "If you won't do it, I will," Niji said. He stepped forward. No, I thought. This was my problem to deal with. This was my opportunity to learn, and I couldn't let someone else take it away, no matter how much I wanted them to. A quick jerk, and my kunai slashed downwards. A brief squeal from the rabbit, and then the chakra dulled, and the life drained away, overtaken by cold. "Pathetic," said Niji, and I realized that I was trembling. I took a shuddering breath and calmed down, twisting my chakra into a quiet tranquility. It was a weird, artificial sort of calm, but it worked at the moment, and that was all that mattered. "Pathetic," he repeated, voice shaking ever so slightly. "Yuyuri, just like my cousin." His chakra was agitated, roiling with suppressed anger and bitterness and oddly enough grief. I turned so that I faced him. For a moment I was silent. "Would you like to gather the wood?" I finally said, quiet and carefully polite. "I'll skin the rabbit." A quick flare of anger and resentment, sharp and sudden. But in the end he said nothing, just strode away, presumably to collect the firewood. I turned back to my rabbit and fortified myself. My fingers tightened. The kunai descended. Daikoku-sensei was making an announcement. "Class, a new student will be joining us this year." I wasn't really paying attention, though. There wasn't much I paid attention to anymore these days, aside from class lessons and other relevant material. So I tuned out my teacher's voice, and was mindlessly spinning my pencil in slow circles when a loud, unpleasant voice shattered the air. Listen up, the voice proclaimed. Startled, I dropped the pencil. I was about to pick it up, but the next words froze me to the spot. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, and I'm gonna be Hokage one day. You'd better believe it. Uzumaki Naruto was an obnoxious little menace. He was annoying. He was loud. He grated. And most of all, he would not shut up. He's driving me crazy, I complained to Shiho as we met up in our usual lunch spot. He's always shouting, or jumping around, or bragging, or saying mean things about the teacher, or making some sort of noisy. It's horrible. I swear I've gone half-deaf. I'm sure, Shiho said agreeably. And he's always going on about how amazing he is, and how he's going to be Hokage, but really, all he does in class is slack off. It's so annoying. And the way he's always talking's like I paused and flailed a bit, struggling to find an analogy that would convey the sheer extent of my indignation. Like a monkey? Shiho suggested. I scrunched up my face. More like a hyperactive squirrel with a megaphone. Only louder and more annoying. Shiho giggled. What's so funny? You're ranting, she said. It's very nice. What? My ranting is nice? Oh yes, she said. To be frank, I haven't seen you so angry about anything for a long time. It's nice. I furrowed my brow. So she was happy because I was angry. Okay. What? I said blankly. Well, honestly, Shiho said, sounding more serious. Honestly, ever since, that you've been walking around like a zombie. No interest in anything except for school and training. Now that she mentioned it, I realized I had been rather distant. Oh. I'm sorry, I said, subdued. How selfish. And to think, all this time Shiho had stuck by me and I hadn't been a good friend to her at all. Shiho patted my shoulder in a reassuring sort of way. It's okay, she said. I don't blame you. It's just nice to see you with some life again. I eased the flute out of the dust-smeared casing. It had been years since I last played it, but now it was time to try again. My fingers fumbled, clumsy from disuse, and the notes stumbled out in a shallow, scratchy warble. It was nothing like the sweet melodies I could lure out in the past. Even so, I could tell that something was different. The music no longer felt hollow, or incomplete. It was all there and alive and beautiful. And though the tone left something to be desired, all I could think of was how wonderful it was to be able to sing again. Shiho, for whatever reason, had decided that Uzumaki Naruto was a good influence on me and was pushing me to invite him into our little circle of friends. Or rather, our line segment of friends, since there were only two of us. But that was beside the point. I had, of course, vehemently tried to veto her decision, but Shiho was not to be moved on the matter. Thus I resigned myself to my fate. To befriend the loudest, most irritating person in my class. If I had to be perfectly honest with myself, though, Naruto himself was only half of the issue. I wouldn't have minded him nearly as much if it weren't for those weird feelings I always got around him. Recognition, for example. Like I knew him from somewhere, or had met him before. Foreboding. Dark and heavy, a deep conviction that something big was going to happen. Power. Which, strangely enough, seemed to be mostly trapped in a bizarre doodle on his stomach. Those three were the main ones, but there was a lot more. Determination. Hate. Loneliness. Warmth. Fire. Life. It was all just one big mass of feeling, so intense that it made me uneasy, not to mention the odd impressions I kept getting around him, mainly about foxes and toads. For whatever reason. I forced myself to ignore it, at least for right now. I couldn't afford to chicken out, after all. The target approaching. Once he was near enough to hear me, I cleared my throat. Uzumaki Naruto? Immediately, I had his attention. Yeah? He seemed caught in a strange mix of suspicion and hope. I gave a polite smile and resisted the urge to twiddle my fingers. No backing out now, Mayo. Just say it. Taking a deep breath, I plunged forward. Hello, Naruto. Would you like to be friends? Naruto, I decided, wasn't so bad once you got past the boasting and the constant chatter. He still wasn't easy being around, what with the intense aura thing he had going on, but after a few days I'd mostly gotten used to it. Besides, he was friendly enough, and very spirited. Lunchtime had certainly become much more lively ever since he joined us. Another nice thing was that I no longer had to face class lessons alone, since Naruto now sat at my table. He wasn't exactly the most helpful partner for classwork, but it was pleasant nonetheless. I'd really forgotten how wonderful it was to sit next to a friend. Naruto himself was rather excited at the prospect of having a friend. Seemed to express this by exuding a constant stream of loud, high-speed babbling both during class and outside of it, and it wasn't long before I learned about his obsession with ramen, his love of orange, which I understood to be some sort of color, his hatred of vegetables, and his fondness for growing plants. That last bit in particular caught my attention. It was a common point, after all. A trait we seemed to share. "So do you have a garden?" I asked him one day, after our little trio had settled under the usual oak tree. "Nah," he said, popping the lid off the container of his lunch. "Not enough space. Just Mr. Ucky and a few others, but that's okay, 'cause they're nice and I'm fine with them." "Wait," said Shiho. "Mr. Ucky? You name your plants?" "Well, yeah. It's more awesome like that, see?" Right. Plus, Naruto went on blithely, "this way, it's kind of like having a family, which is really cool. I've always wanted a family." Shiho fell silent. I didn't blame her. What was one supposed to say to something like that? Thankfully, Naruto didn't seem to notice our uneasiness, and had already continued to ramble on about some random inconsequential thing. I made an effort to listen, but my mind kept drifting back to what Naruto had said earlier. Gardens, plants, family. It was familiar. And it made me think. Made me think about the untended patch of ground in the backyard, the discarded bundles of lavender, the dying tomato plants. How there was always a sense of fear and dread and distance, and how the memories made me want to turn around and never come back. Then I thought about Naruto, annoying, brash, straightforward, fearless Naruto, and I wondered if maybe it was time to stop running away. "Was no problem at all for an awesome ninja like me," Naruto said loudly, jerking me out of my thoughts. And so then I was like, bam, and all the frying pans exploded. "Naruto," I interrupted. "Eh?" "I have a garden." "Oh." He seemed puzzled. That's great." "It's old," I hurried on, "and a bit neglected. So I was, wondering if you and Shiho wanted to help me patch it up. There's lots of plants there, too, and you can name them if you want, that way it'll be like having one big family." For a moment Naruto seemed speechless. Then the joy overflowed, and I had to inch backwards to avoid getting scorched from the sheer intensity of it. "Sure," he said, practically vibrating with happiness. "Sounds good," Shiho agreed. "I wouldn't mind." I smiled, relieved that I wouldn't be facing this alone. "Okay, so how about this Saturday?" "Oh, those are the rosemary pots. Here, let's move them into the sunlight." Shiho was delighted. "Ah, rosemary. It means remembrance in the language of flowers, did you know?" "Remembrance." I froze. Yes. Yes. "So Naruto, did you think of any good names yet?" asked Shiho, either not noticing or not commenting on my sudden panic. Probably the latter. That was an awfully quick subject change. "Yeah," Naruto said while I recomposed myself. "I'm gonna call this one Shiho-chan and that one Mayo-chan and that one Naruto the future Hokage." Shiho seemed unimpressed. "What the heck?" "What? They're good names." "Not that I'm not flattered," she said, violently watering the Naruto plant, "but why on earth?" Shiho," I cut in, poking the flooded soil with a dubious finger. "You're watering the future Hokage too much, his roots are going to rot." "Oh. Sorry," she paused. "Wait, don't tell me you're just going to accept those weird names?" Naruto gave an obnoxious laugh. "Ha! See? Mayo-chan sees how awesome it is." "Awesome?" Shiho said, moving on to the Mayo plant. "More like unoriginal." "And now you're watering me too little," I interrupted happily. "You need to give me more water, or I'm going to develop a shallow root system and die. Also, I think we should prune Shiho a bit, she's getting too fat." "Now you're just messing with me," Shiho grumbled. I smiled innocently. After that, we met up at my house every Saturday to work on the garden. Our weekly sessions weren't very productive at first. For one thing, neither Naruto nor Shiho were very experienced in gardening. Naruto kept getting mixed up between herbs and weeds, and Shiho had trouble figuring out how much water she was supposed to use. To my surprise, Naruto was rather adept in that area. When asked, he replied with an exuberant, course I know how to water plants, it's like my hobby, plus I'm just awesome like that. As for me, I simply found it hard to concentrate with so many ghosts in the garden. Although, if my friends ever did notice me freezing up or zoning out, they never said anything about it. It got better with time. Naruto and Shiho learned quickly. In time, the plants were all bestowed names, half of which I could not remember. The garden regained its previous luster. Herbs once more hung from the walls of the house. And one by one, the ghosts began to disappear. Bullies were nothing new. They laughed, jeered, and taunted, but if you ignored them, then it didn't really matter what they said. And it wasn't like it was anything I wasn't used to. Over the years, my persistence in dirty fighting earned me a rather unpopular reputation as well as a fair amount of bullies. So yes, I was good at ignoring them. Naruto, on the other hand, wasn't. "Why don't you say anything?" he demanded when someone Shinta, I think, called me an unflattering name, to which I refused to respond. I blinked. Why would I? It's not worth it. So you're just going to let it go? You're not going to stand up for yourself at all? He was getting angrier and more passionate, and his chakra was swirling around in fervent loop-de-loops, and it was all so extreme that I couldn't help but feel a little alarmed. "That's cowardly!" he shouted, and I resisted the urge to put my hands over my ears. "Well, what would you have me do?" I said, trying to get him to calm down. "Anything. Just lie down and let people walk all over you." And with that, he stormed off. The next day found Shinta discovering the hard way that all his possessions were laced with itching powder. Rose hips are a wonderful thing, I thought as I listened to his whines of discomfort. Next to me, Naruto was laughing. "Oh man, that's priceless," he said before recovering just enough to be suspicious. Hey, you wouldn't happen to have anything to do with it, would you?" I gave him an angelic smile. "Why, Naruto, I have no idea what you're talking about." "Pay attention," Shiho ordered, pounding the table with an iron fist. "But this is so boring," Naruto whined. His voice scraped unpleasantly against my eardrums, which did horrible things to my tolerance. With some effort, I squashed my irritation. Now was not the time to lose focus. "To be frank," Shiho said, "you and Mayo both have a high chance of failing the ninjutsu portion of the final exam, which, may I remind you, makes up a large percentage of your final grade. If you want to have any chance at passing, then I suggest you study hard for the written portion." Yeah, Naruto grumbled. "Okay then," Shiho said. Papers rustled as she flipped through her notes. "What can you tell me about chakra resonance?" Cha-cha, what now?" "It's how chakra reacts to different chakra," I said, ignoring Naruto's confused mumblings. "Usually it's subtle, like on a microscopic level, but a really powerful chakra can leave a strong impression. That's how killing intent works." That could have been better phrased, to be honest, but it is more or less the point. Yes, Shiho agreed. "Naruto, did you get that?" Basically, chakra affects chakra," I summarized. "Oh, right. I guess." Shiho sighed, and paper rustling once more filled the room. "Let's see. Maybe you'll get this one, since you seem so enamored with the Hokage position. Which Hokage was responsible for creating the great forests that give Konoha its name?" Nara perked up. "Whoa, a Hokage made those? Seriously?" There was a distinct sound of Shiho face-palming. "The first," I said helpfully. "Right," Shiho said, recovering fast. "The trees were created from Senju Hashirama's wood-release techniques." "Senju who?" The perplexed tone in Naruto's voice did not bode well. "Naruto," I said, frowning, "did you even study at all?" "Yes," he said, defensive. I mean. All of a sudden, he deflated. "It's just that studying is so boring." At that, Shiho sighed again. "Naruto, you need to study. It's very important, if you want to graduate." Naruto grumbled but didn't reply. I frowned. Like Shiho had said, there was a high chance of failing the ninjutsu portion of the exam, both for me and for Naruto, which put us at a severe disadvantage. And if, in the end, one of us didn't pass, then what would happen to our friendship? Up until now, I'd been harboring the rather foolish hope that if we all graduated, maybe we'd get placed on the same team. There were 3 of us, after all. But now, observing Naruto, I could tell that he wasn't ready at all. And I couldn't help but worry. "Fail," said Daikoku-sensei. It was inevitable. My clones were terrible, after all. Even so, I couldn't help but feel a bit disappointed. However, my teacher continued, and I felt hope rise in my chest, since you scored reasonably well in both the Taijutsu exam and Shurikenjutsu exam, and performed exceptionally well on the written exam, I am willing to pass you based on your overall scores. I blinked and ran over that last sentence again. Willing to pass you based on your overall scores. There was no doubt. I did it. I did it. Congratulations, Akademayo, Daikoku-sensei said, as I stumbled forward to retrieve a forehead protector. He reached forward to pat my shoulder. It's been a pleasure teaching you. Out of all my students, I dare say you've improved the most. At those words, I almost dropped my new forehead protector in shock. This was the first time Daikoku-sensei had praised me, since forever, really. Thank you, sensei, I said, touched. As a sign of respect, I bowed. Thank you for the gift of instruction. Then, tying my forehead protector around my head, I left the examination room. Ninja. I smiled. I was a real ninja now. The schoolyard filled up as more and more parents and relatives arrived to congratulate the new graduates. My brother himself wasn't there, he was out on a mission, but he promised to be there for the actual graduation ceremony, so I wasn't too upset. The crowd didn't bother me as it may have once had, so it was fairly easy for me to navigate through. Concentrating, I did a scan for my friends. It was in this way that I quickly found Shiho, who was talking animatedly with her parents, and Naruto, who was sitting by himself on the swing. Why was he? Oh. I picked my way through the throng of people to the lonely tree under which Naruto sat. Naruto? I said once I was standing in front of him. Oh, hey, Mayo-chan, he said, all quiet and un-Naruto-like. I guess I didn't pass. I twisted my fingers, unsure of what to say. I'm sorry, I said at last, and it sounded trite even to my own ears. Yeah, he said. Silence descended. I tried not to fidget. I'll try again, Naruto said finally, and this time, there was an edge of determination. Next year, I'll try again. And this time, I won't mess up. I'll do it, and I'll graduate. I will try again. It was, I reflected, kind of amazing how he just wouldn't give up. I know I probably would have, if I'd been in his place. Failure did terrible things to my morale, but for Naruto, it just seemed to make him stronger. Yeah, I said. I'm sure you will. And somehow, I knew without a doubt that he would. He waited and waited, but the one he waited for never came. At first it was just frustrating. Now it was disconcerting. You still here, huh? The voice rang out and seemed to hang in the still air. He shifted and peered at the arrival. You don't come here often. No, I don't. Still no luck? No. He does not come. You think something's wrong. It wasn't a question. Perhaps. And the others? He narrowed his eyes. They believe it to be a problem with the seal. Like the iron armor seal, then. It is a possibility. At those words, the newcomer barked out a laugh. A possibility, eh? That's so like you, always cautious. Waiting around and hiding, maybe it's fine for you, but I'm telling you it doesn't suit me. Doesn't suit me at all. Patience. We lose our advantage if we move too quickly. It's tedious. It's essential. They lapsed into silence, considering each other. Then the newcomer heaved a sigh. You know, if what you said is true, then Shikaku is the first priority. I'm well aware. It's just that we've been hearing rumors, you see. On our travels. Something about a bloodthirsty demon kid in Suna. A pointed stare. Do you really think you have everything under control? Because given the word that's going around, we're a bit concerned. He gave a brittle smile. Oh, is it we now? Whatever happened to don't associate me with him? Shut up. Answered the question. He sighed and fell silent. When he finally spoke again, it was quiet and solemn. Apologies, he murmured, but rest assured. It's been taken care of. The newcomer stared at him before nodding and preparing to leave. I hope you know what you're doing. As do I, he thought, watching as his companion departed. As do I. It had been a rather busy few days. First was all the paperwork, the genin registration papers, the ID photos, the consent forms. All tedious work. After hours of fine print and wobbly signatures and slow tactile reading, I decided that paperwork was the most evil thing in existence. Next was the shopping. I had just graduated, after all, and needed to buy new gear and clothing. In this, I had enlisted my brother's help, since the last time I'd gone shopping by myself I'd apparently come home looking like a distressingly neon peacock. And then, at last, were the team assignments. Truth to be said, I was a bit nervous. Genin teams meant working with new people, strangers, more likely than not, and I'd never been very good with people. On the appointed day of team assignments, I worried for the entire morning and arrived at the classroom with butterflies in my stomach. All the graduates from this year's classes were gathered together. As I sat down next to Shiho, I cast my senses around the room. All around me I could feel the brush of familiar chakra: Lee, Niji, Shinta, Tenten. Thinking about Tenten made me feel guilty though, so I shut down that train of thought. Or tried to, at least. It's awfully hard to not think about something. Team 3 Rock Lee, Hyuga Niji, and Tanaka Tenten, Daikoku-sensei said, which didn't exactly make it easier to not think. It certainly didn't stop me from noticing the resultant little flares of emotion: Lee's exuberant determination, Niji's familiar disdain, Tenten's sullen resentment. Team 4, Daikoku-sensei continued, and I turned my attention back to team assignments. After he finished calling out names for Team 4, none of which I recognized, he moved on to Team 5, and then Team 6. Team 6 Akademayo. I perked up. This was it. Ihara Yugura. Ihara Yugura, I turned the name over in my mind. It was definitely familiar. He was in my class, wasn't he? And Yohei Shiho. I blinked and paused mid-thought. On my right, Shiho gave a small gasp and grabbed my arm. Mayo. We're on the same team. Yes, I agreed, a little surprised. 2 girls on one team was a very rare phenomenon, but happy nonetheless. Shiho was on my team. Whatever happened, she'd be with me. I could get through this. The door burst open, and a tall someone exploded into the classroom. Several students shrieked. Next to me, Shiho froze. What a glorious new day it is, the someone declared. Team 3, follow me. There was silence. You are our Jounin instructor? Niji finally said. He sounded like he'd swallowed a lemon. Indeed, the someone proclaimed, clothes rustling as he struck one dramatic pose after another. Isn't it marvelous? To be a sensei to tend to the bright fires of education and learning, to be able to watch them grow with a fiery passion. That is the joy of teaching. That is true happiness. Now come, our springtimes of youth await us. With that, he launched himself outside, blowing the door off its hinges in the process. Yes, sensei, cried Rock Lee as he charged outside in pursuit. A short pause, and then 2 bewildered genin trailed after him. Again, there was silence. Youth. Eyebrows. Sunsets. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine, because dear God, that was really disturbing. And familiar. Disturbingly familiar. The silence was broken when Daikoku-sensei coughed awkwardly and headed out the room, muttering about finding a janitor. The door let out a pitiful, splintering groan as he passed its remains. What just happened? Shiho said, sounding faint. Youth, I mumbled back at her, feeling a bit dazed. And eyebrows. Lots of eyebrows. Shiho replied. Yes, I agreed. It took a moment, but eventually the class recovered from the shock. After settling down, we continued to wait for our respective teachers to arrive. A few more Jounin sensei came and went, and then finally. Team 6? A man called as he eased into the classroom. My heart leapt. That was us. Team 6, you're with him. The man paused. What the heck happened to the door? We ended up in a dango shop. It was a nice place. The atmosphere was cozy and warm, and the air was adrift with a crisp, sweet smell. The 4 of us, me, Shiho, Yugura, and our teacher settled around a smooth wooden table that was tucked in the far corner of the shop. Thought it'd be nice to have something to eat while we talk, our Jounin instructor said cheerfully as he ordered tea and dango. It's getting close to lunch, anyway. The tea arrived swiftly. Orange blossom, I noted. Shiho and I sipped from our cups. Yugura ignored his. So, let's start with introductions, said our new teacher. Why don't you go first? It took a moment before I realized he was pointing at me. I'm Akademayo, I said, After a while, it was clear that he was expecting a bit more. I hesitated, unsure of what to say. And then, as if in answer, familiar words floated at the tip of my memory. Any hobbies? Likes, dislikes, dreams for the future? Right, that's right. I did have something to say, after all. I like playing the flute, I ventured, and growing flowers. I have a garden. Hobbies. Likes. The Jounin instructor made an encouraging noise in his throat. Reassured, I continued on. I don't like loud noises. Or tomatoes. Dislikes. My dream for the future is Toto. I faltered. My dream was something very personal. There was no way I was going to just say it out loud in front of two people I barely knew. I won't ever forget what you said. Especially since, to me, it was more than a dream. I'll make you proud. Grow into something you'll be proud of. It was a statement. A promise. My dream is to grow. To grow into a tree, I finished. The Jounin seemed perplexed. Your dream is to become a tree? Because that's a perfectly reasonable goal in life, Yagura muttered under his breath. Trees are big and strong, I said evasively, twisting my fingers a little. They make people look up to them. They're beautiful. And they smell nice. The Jounin fell silent. He seemed to be contemplating something. Exactly what he was thinking of, I had no idea. Okay, he said after a moment, recovering his cheerful tone from before. How about you there, girl in the glasses? I'm Yuhi Shiho, Shiho said. I like to read books, solve puzzles, and pick flowers. I don't like bullies, or gee, she suddenly cut herself off. My dream is to become worthy. And then it was my other teammate's turn. My name is Ihara Yagura, he said, and then, following the tentative template I'd set up, there aren't many things I like, and there are a lot of things I dislike, which I suppose is only natural since the world is full of crap anyway. I don't have a dream, dreams are for children. I blinked slowly. Well, that was cynical. Interesting, said our Jounin instructor, as if it were perfectly normal to declare your lack of faith in humanity. I suppose it's my turn, My teammates and I perked up at this all this time, and none of us knew his name yet. Let's see, he said, setting down his teacup with a clack. My name is Yamashiro Aoba, Special Jounin. I work in intelligence. I like it when everything goes according to plan and I dislike it when it doesn't. My goal is to train you three into good, respectable ninja provided, of course, that you're able to pass my little test. Test? Yagura asked warily. You mean the Genin test? Right, oh, Aoba-sensei said happily. You aren't officially Team 6 yet until you take it, you see. But don't worry, it's a pretty simple test. What do we have to do? Shiho asked, ever practical. Well, you see. We're going to fail, Yagura said, after Aoba-sensei left. Shiho made a noise of disagreement. It sounds easy enough, honestly. Go home, crack the individual codes he gave us. She waved her paper in the air, and then meet up here tomorrow and answer 3 questions. Surely it couldn't be that difficult. Yagura scoffed. You don't get it, do you? The test's a dud. It'll be designed to make us fail. What do you mean? I asked, appalled. That couldn't be right, could it? It seemed so needlessly cruel. Take a look around you, Yagura said. What do you see? Yagura plowed on before I could even begin to wonder how to answer that. A weirdo tree hugger, a bookworm from a no-name clan, and a talentless nobody. None of the higher-ups would waste Jounin resources on people like us. We're a fake team. A throwaway. I winced. Not that I minded being called a weirdo, especially since it was kind of true, but Shiho got touchy when it came to matters concerning her clan. I wasn't sure why that was the case. All I knew was that the no-name clan dig was a really bad idea. And I was right. I could feel Shiho's chakra puff up in sharp, twisting anger. Frankly, she began, voice lowering to a hiss, your pessimism is getting ridiculous, and it's doing no one any favors. A throwaway, really? Just what exactly are you basing this on, anyway? Oh, I don't know, Yagura bit back, just a small, unimportant thing I like to call reality. There's a difference between reality and paranoia. PSH. You don't say. You. Ugh, you're the most spiteful, unlikable person I've ever met. Guys? Personal insults now? I'm in awe of your maturity. Guys. And I'm in awe of your nihilism. The world is full of crap, honestly. Hey, I'm not a nihilist, I'm a cynic. Get your facts straight. Really, for a bookworm you sure are ignorant. Oh my god, that's hot. Sorry, I said, my empty teacup dangled over his head. When my attempts at getting their attention had failed, I had resorted to assault via orange blossom tea. Hardly the most diplomatic solution, but at least it worked, right? Although Yugura didn't seem too happy about it. What was that for? Sorry, I said again, not bothering to sound contrite at all, but we should probably get started. It's already 2 and I'm terrible at breaking codes. Plus, Aoba-sensei had strongly hinted that, once solved, the hidden message in the codes would instruct us to do something. That meant that the sooner we cracked our codes the better, just in case it was something ridiculously time-consuming like, I don't know, creating a replica of the Hokage monument. Or beating Naruto in a ramen-eating competition. Besides, I continued, the faster we get the codes done the better chance we'll have of passing. Right, said Shiho. Yugura made a noise of assent that sounded like, HWMP. I tapped the table with a finger. Okay, so, meet up here at 9 in the morning tomorrow? Okay. MH Shiren. And so we left the dango shop, each of us going our separate ways. The entire rest of the day was spent running my hands over the slip of paper Aoba-sensei gave me, racking my brain for an answer, and scribbling out possible combinations in my notebook. In the end, though, it was no use. The cipher was just too complex, and I wasn't nearly good enough at code breaking to solve it. I just couldn't do it. I arrived at the dango shop the next morning, dejected and feeling like I'd let my team down. All their hard work, and I blew it for them because I couldn't figure out one stupid code. As I slinked toward the table we used yesterday, I realized that Yugura and Shiho were there already. I sighed and braced myself. Might as well get it over with. Guys, I began, and then forced myself to continue. I, didn't manage to solve the code. Sorry. The answers I got were surprising. You too? Asked Shiho. Join the club, Yugura muttered. They sounded tired, as if they'd spent the whole night working on their slips. Like how I almost did, at least until I fell asleep at my desk. But I said, and then, huh? They failed too? Yugura I could maybe understand, as mean as that sounded, but Shiho? Code breaking was her thing. Back at the academy, she had owned the one unit we did on ciphers. The idea that Shiho failed in something like this was ridiculous and completely alien. You didn't solve the code, Shiho? I asked, just to make sure. Shiho sighed. I was certain I did, to be honest, until I put the words together and got a message that made no sense. I tried over and over again, but it was always the same thing. See, look. She handed me the slip that Aoba gave her. I funneled chakra into my fingers and read the uncoded message. True any often riddle A and if attention might key. Well, that was coherent. Hang on, Yugura said suddenly. I thought we weren't allowed to share our slips with each other. What happened to confidential information? That only applies after we solved them, Shiho said. Don't you remember the instructions Aoba-sensei gave us? Vaguely. Once the 3 of you have solved your codes, Shiho recited, consider the information inside strictly classified. I don't care if the Hokage himself walks up to you and asks for it and tell anyone. Tomorrow, I will ask you questions relevant to the hidden message in the codes, so you'd best solve it by the end of today. How do you even do that? Was that word for word? Tell me it wasn't word for word. Shiho ignored him. Basically, we can tell each other now but not after we solve it. She trailed off and went very still. I was about to prod Shiho when I noticed something familiar flickering at the edge of my tightly drawn-in senses. A pleasant chakra that felt like silky leaves. That's it, Shiho said, snapping me out of sensor mode. I turned my attention back to the matter at hand. What? Yugura demanded. What is it? We've been going about this the wrong way, she said. These aren't individual ciphers, they're all part of the same code. The 3 separate pieces and the confidentiality thing were just to mislead us and prevent us from working together quick. Aoba-sensei will probably be here soon. Let me see your slips. Yugura and I whipped our papers out. Shiho grabbed them. Let's see, she muttered, and I heard the scritch-scratch of a pencil as she worked them out. This is a simple checkerboard cipher, shouldn't be too difficult as long as I still have my Kiahaluk. She handed our slips back to us, with the decoded message written next to the encoded one. I ran my finger across the paper. The oval A in inside but pay just the. And Yagura's read. Meaning story be wrapped mystery enigma you find. Now we bring them together, Shiho said. Like this, yes. Again, I felt the breath of velvet leaves, only this time it was stronger. Then, with a jolt, I recognized it. Guys, I said, my voice urgent. I can sense Aoba-sensei. He's less than 100 meters away. Yagura spat out an expletive, and then turned to Shiho. Hurry! I'm trying. 50 meters, I said. Can't you solve a little faster? Frankly, I'll solve faster if you talk less. 25, I said. Shiho mumbled something incoherent, and then. I've got it. It's like a rail fence cipher. That's clever. By the way, a cipher within a cipher anyway. The words are written downwards on a rail being, in this case, the separate slips of paper, so we just need to alternate words and the message. Save the cryptography lesson for later, we don't have time. 10 meters just around the corner. Hurried scritch scratch ing continued. After what seemed like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds, Shiho threw down her pencil. Here's the message, she said, rapidly and a little breathless. The true meaning of any story will often be a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma, but if you pay attention you just might find the key. Lovely, said Yagura. What the heck does it mean? Shiho never got a chance to answer because Aoba-sensei chose that precise moment to stroll in through the entrance of the dango shop. First question, Aoba-sensei said. What was the color of the earring I wore yesterday? What? My mind blanked and shut down. Luckily, it wasn't needed at the moment. You weren't wearing an earring yesterday, Yagura said promptly. Oh, a sharp one, are we? That's good. Very good. Right, second question. Maybe I could answer this one. I perked up. What is the 22nd word of the complete decoded message I sent you? And immediately wilted. He was asking for the 22nd? I could barely remember the first three. I've got this, Shiho said after a pause. It's Ao. What part of strictly classified do you not understand? Yagura hissed under his breath, before removing his elbow from Shiho's gut. Oh right, I thought. Now that we'd solved the code, we weren't allowed to talk about it. I'd forgotten. I'm afraid that the information is confidential, Shiho amended, a bit stiffly. Close call, Aoba said, and I got the impression that he was grinning. Okay, third and final question. This one's the most important, so listen up. If you were to choose between your comrade's life and the safety of sensitive information, which would you choose? Comrade's life, said Shiho. The information, obviously, said Yagura, at the exact same time. Oh boy. A short pause, in which I could feel Shiho and Yagura glaring at each other. Dissension in the team? Aoba said lightly. I spoke up for the first time. Aoba-sensei, could you give us a little time to discuss this? In the field, an enemy ninja won't just give you time to discuss, he said, sounding amused. But we aren't in the field, and I'm not an enemy, so I'll let this one slide. 5 minutes. He got up from the table and sauntered outside, giving us a little privacy. There was a moment's silence in which we waited for our teacher to get out of earshot. Once he was, it was like a switch had flipped. Shiho and Yagura immediately started arguing in low, fierce voices. Intel over lives? Are you serious? Don't be a dunce, Yagura snapped back. A single information leak can jeopardize an entire village. In the end, it's a numbers game, and one comrade's life is not worth sacrificing thousands of others. So you would just let your friends die like that? Yagura's chakra gave a weird little flinch, even though his body didn't move at all. It doesn't matter if I agree or not, he said, but it's the answer they want to hear. Aoba-sensei is from Intelligencito. You really think he wouldn't value information? Not more than his team, certainly, Shiho said. The backbone of Konoha is founded on the concept of teamwork. Frankly, it's nearly as prominent a philosophy as our will of fire. As they continued to volley arguments back and forth, my mind wandered back to the strange message Shiho had decoded. What was it again? Something about a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. What did that even mean anyway? And how exactly did it relate to the 3 questions asked? Pondering over these questions, I couldn't help but feel like we were missing something. Something deeper. Shiho, Yagura, I began, but was interrupted by Aoba's cheery voice. Time's up. He popped back in, and my teammates and I quieted down. Have you 3 decided on an answer? Yagura humphed. Shiho shuffled her feet. I wrung my hands. No one said anything? I guess that's a no then. Aoba-sensei gave a dramatic sigh. Come now, is it that difficult to just choose something? There are only two options, after all. You've got a 50-50 chance. Aoba's chakra quivered and shifted. I blinked and focused my attention on it. It felt like a shadow, sliding over the leaves. Shaded with something subtle and sly and false. He was lying. But what was he lying about? I ran over his words. Choose something 50-50 chance, two options. Two options. My heart beat faster. Did we have, perhaps, a third option? Quickly, I reviewed the entire test. I thought about how we nearly missed that we had to work together for the first portion. How we almost tripped up again in the second. How none of the problems or questions were as they first seemed, how they were so much more complex than they appeared to be, how they were like a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. We have an answer, I said, making up my mind. We do? Yagura muttered. Shiho shushed him. Let her talk. Go on, Aoba-sensei said. Which one would you pick? For a second I hesitated. Then, hoping that my hunch was right, I said, neither. Next to me, I could feel Shiho and Yagura sending me strong vibes of "Are you crazy?" and "What the heck are you doing?" I fidgeted but otherwise tried to ignore them. What do you mean by that? Aoba asked. The way he talked was slow, measured, unreadable. It's the meat's not right, I said, trying to explain. Judging that protecting a secret is always more important than protecting your comrades, or vice versa. It's too extreme. The circumstances are going to be different for different scenarios. You can't just plug in such a narrow-minded view and expect it to work for every situation. And that's why either option you gave us is the right answer. My stuttering mess of a speech was followed by a long stretch of silence. Nervous, I began fiddling with my fingers, wondering if I had miscalculated. Then Aoba-sensei cleared his throat. In my division, he began, sounding very serious, there is something we call the four qualities. The four qualities, sensei? Shiho asked, probably wondering what this had to do with anything. Yes. Skill, discretion, perception, and judgment. The four qualities of a good intelligence agent. There are others, of course, but those four are the main ones. Anyway, when we make intelligence-based teams, we look for students who embody these traits. That's why you three were picked. Each of you has displayed, consistently, at least one or more of the four qualities throughout your academy years. You were picked because we believed you could succeed. I sense a but coming up, Yagura said, when Aoba-sensei paused. Well, I'll be honest with you, our teacher said wryly. I had a few doubts at the start. There were certain factors about this team that made it less than ideal. But I'm happy to say that you all proved me wrong rather nicely. I blinked. Test. That's right, he said, his voice growing warm. You've passed the four qualities test. All three of you, congratulations and well done. We're now officially Team 6. We continued to stick around the dango shop after Aoba-sensei left. We were a team now. After all, it was only right that we got to know each other better. Besides, there was something that I wanted to tell them. I'd actually almost forgotten, until Aoba-sensei pointed out the less than ideal factors of our team. I had no doubt he was referring to me. So after Shiho and I ordered some more tea, and Yagura got a stick of dango, we got comfortable around the table and talked. It was formal and a bit stilted at first, but once Shiho and Yagura, grudgingly, apologized to each other for their previous quarrel, conversation became easier. So, Shiho said, her voice sly and smug, according to Aoba-sensei, we were handpicked. Not such a throwaway after all, huh? Yeah, Yagura grumbled. Go ahead, say I told you so. I dare you. Please don't start this again, I said pleasantly, waving my half-filled teacup in a threatening sort of manner. Shiho laughed, and I smiled, and even Yagura let out a reluctant chuckle. We continued eating our food in companionable silence, before I spoke up again. Hey guys, I began conversationally. There's something you should probably know if we're going to be working together. What, said Shiho? I guess it does make sense, if you think about it, said Yagura. What? It explains a lot, too. Like why you never look people in the eye when talking to them. Or how you never seem to have any viable blind spots when sparring. What, I don't even how. Or how you always bring a tape recorder to lectures. Or how you can't perform clones or transformations. Wow, it's actually really obvious in retrospect. I can't believe no one ever suspected. We're all morons. This is so. Oh my god. This. Oh my god. Also, your friend is freaking out here. Mind calming her down before she gives herself an aneurysm? It's okay, Shiho, I said, putting what I hoped was a soothing expression on my face. I probably failed, though, since I had no idea what a soothing expression was supposed to look like. It's not okay, Shiho insisted. You're blind. You can't see. I've been your friend for years and years and I never knew this. Years and years, Mayo. I'm sorry. And all this time, she continued, bulldozing over my weak apology, I'd been so concerned over my eyes while my best friend was blind. Oh God, I must have come off as so insensitive. It's okay, really, I said. How is this in any way okay? I tilted my head. Well, I can get around well enough without my eyes. So I don't really mind. Right, she said. That's another thing, just how do you do that anyway? Walking around, fighting and all? I considered how to answer this. Chakra, I said eventually. It's everywhere, and I can sense it. You guys have chakra too. Based on how it feels, intensity, texture, clarity, I can pinpoint how far away you are and where you're standing relative to my position. And reading? Shiho put in, sounding much more collected than before. The cerebral nature of the conversation evidently calmed her. I know you can, I've seen you read textbooks before. Tactile reading, I said. I make the nerves hypersensitive in my fingers, of course, she said. You always read with your finger, why haven't I ever noticed this? Like I said, Yugura said. Morons. You're not helping, Shiho informed him. When Yugura only snapped back a terse, sarcastic reply, they quickly dissolved into another argument. They did that a lot, I noticed. But it was rather fun to see them argue, figuratively, of course, so I simply settled back and listened as Shiho called Yugura a presumptuous pig-headed pinhead, to which Yugura in return said something about a pot and a kettle. I like my team, I decided as I drained the rest of my tea. The Akita family was an old one, having existed prior to the foundation of Konoha. It used to be a lot bigger, not big enough to be considered a clan, mind you, but certainly much larger than the current grand total of 2. Since we were an old family, there were certain attributes that had cropped up and evolved special physical traits that eventually passed down through the generations all the way to Yoroi and me. Our bodies tended to be more adaptive, our chakra systems more malleable and accepting. The traits were subtle and not something as noticeable as, say, the Byakugan or the Sharingan, but they were there nonetheless. And more importantly, they allowed us to perform the family technique. Chakra absorption. The problem with normal chakra absorption techniques, such as chakra transfusions, was that they were costly and inefficient. You had to first convert the chakra into a neutral state, so that the body you were transferring it to, but yours or someone else, didn't reject the foreign chakra. And during that conversion stage, a lot of the initial chakra is lost, not to mention the massive amount of effort required to convert it in the first place. So unless you were an insanely skilled medical ninja with exceptional chakra control, extensive knowledge of the human body, and a strong will, the costs of chakra absorption outweighed the benefits. What was special about our technique was that it required a lot of mental fortitude, but not a lot of finesse by way of chakra control. It was the unique physique of our bodies. You see, our chakra system automatically assimilated any incoming chakra and adapted itself to fully utilize it. All we had to do was to mentally adapt, since our bodies had the physical part covered. It was the reason why children in the Akita family were only taught the technique after they'd graduated and proven themselves mentally ready. Sloppily performed, the technique tended to backfire, and the results weren't very pretty. I'd heard horror stories, multiple personalities, children gone berserk, people turning into vegetables. That was why I'd only just started learning it, instead of years before, like most other clan kids did with their family techniques. I didn't want to become a vegetable. It sounded scary. Dog seal, my brother said. I formed a dog seal. Straight palm, curled fist. Snake. Hands clasped, facing heavenward. Tiger. Index fingers extended, the rest of them folded. Now concentrate on your chakra, he commanded. I obliged, wondering when he had gotten so bossy. Side effect of becoming a chunin, probably. Breathe. He'd gotten a lot terser too. And quieter. Ever since Mom. Focus on the areas in your hand, he continued, forcing me out of my morbid thoughts. Feel your surroundings. Do you feel it? Yes, I said. Everything around me, especially the areas around my hand, had gone into high relief. The flowers and trees in our backyard became streaks of cool fire. The earth vibrated beneath my feet. The ever-present hum in the air had grown stronger. The atmosphere was alive and enthralling. Magnetic. You feel the chakra in the atmosphere? Yes. Good. You'll sense a pull. Don't answer it. Don't even touch it. That's natural energy, and it's very dangerous. Natural energy? Toads? I said for some reason. What? Nothing. I quickly shook it off. Now was not the time to be distracted. Right, Yura said. We start easy. Put your hands on mine. Hands are the simplest point of access. The chakra flow is greater. And we're related, so the mental strain will be lessened. Family is always the easiest. I put my hands over my brother's, and immediately felt the call of his chakra. It was teeming. He had a lot more chakra than I did, and his hands were like a massive intersection on a highway of energy. Now pull, he said. I pulled. The chakra came, swift and easy, sliding through like strings of butter. I felt the weird sensation of my chakra system changing ever so slightly, adapting to the foreign energy. Then I sensed something light and heavy and odd and familiar all at the same time, and I realized it was the spiritual portion of Yoroi's chakra. This was the hard part. With all the willpower I could muster, I pressed down on the spiritual energy, pushing, prodding, pressing, willing it to conform, to match, to be assimilated. After a long struggle, it happened. My will overpowered it, resonated too strongly, too deeply, and the energy just sort of dissolved and merged into mine. 5 minutes, said Yoroi. Not bad for the first time. Is it always so tiring? I asked, slumped over in the grass. Physically, I was great. Mentally, I was drained. It gets better, he assured me. After, lots of practice. I sighed and rolled over. Yoroi patted my shoulder. We'll continue this later, he said, with a trace of apology. Right now, I've got a mission to get to. Remind me why we're doing this again, said Yugura. Because Mayo has an idea and I trust her, said Shiho. Well, yes, but 5 seconds ago we were kind of, on a mission. We still are, Shiho pointed out. My point exactly. Mind telling me what you three are up to? Aoba-sensei said, ambling alongside us. Just because I gave you guys free reign over this one mission doesn't mean you get to run all over the place and do whatever the heck you want. Just so you know. I smiled. Matatabi, I said by way of explanation. Ah, said Shiho. Clever, agreed Aoba. What? Said Yugura. We're here, I said, turning right onto a smaller path that led to my home. Wait a second, please. I entered the house and exited through the side door into the garden. There, I gathered what I needed and headed back out. Let's go, I said cheerfully, before turning right to continue down the road. Mayo, Shiho called. Naka Forest is in the other direction. I paused. Oh. I knew that. I spun around and continued in the other direction, just as cheerfully as before. Right, Yugura said, once we were back on the main road. Now can someone please tell me what's going on? Tora rubbed herself all over me, her body pretzeling into all sorts of bizarre shapes. I think it likes you, Yugura said dryly. Yes, I agreed, as the cat mewed drowsily and twisted around my legs like a vine on a trellis. A very happy, intoxicated vine on a trellis. It was a clever idea, Aoba-sensei said, pleased. Almost no effort expended, and very effective, too. Everything happened just as planned. Although you could have told me what the plan was before the crazy cat came careening at us like a rocket, Yugura said. I almost impaled it. Frankly, it's a good thing you didn't, Shiho said, or we'd have some explaining to do to the fire daimyo's wife. Come on, mission complete. Let's go. I picked up the violently purring ball of cat and followed my team back to the mission assignment desk at the Ninja Academy. Madame Shirjimi was ecstatic over the return of her lost cat and immediately began to strangle Tora with her deadly show of love. The cat squirmed a little but overall didn't seem to mind being affectionately throttled. But then again, who knew? Catnip did some very strange things to felines, and Tora, it seemed, was no exception. It was a lovely Saturday morning. Squirrels chattered back and forth, as was their daily routine. The overhead trees rustled and sighed and stretched their creaking limbs. Somewhere in the vibrant foliage, the crooning soliloquy of a mourning dove could be heard. It was soothing. A quiet symphony of nature. Morning, Mayo-chan, Naruto said, bellowed, and the sweet illusion of peace was thus shattered. I pulled my face in a semblance of a smile, and fought the urge to cover my ears. It was something I found myself doing a lot in Naruto's presence. It was just the two of us today. Shiho had begged off from our usual gardening session, saying she had to do something. I wasn't sure what. But Shiho wasn't the flighty type. I was certain that it had to be something pretty important. Either way, I missed Shiho and her no-nonsense, down-to-earth personality. Without her mitigating presence, Naruto's chatter seemed 10 times louder than it usually did. It didn't help that he was particularly temperamental today. We had only just begun to water the geraniums, and he was already blasting off on a rant. He's always trying to act cool, always trying to make me look bad. I made an agreeable noise in the back of my throat as I moved on from the geraniums to the goldenrod. The goldenrod seed heads were coated in the wispy fluff that was so characteristic for aster plants. I brushed the downy tips with an experimental finger and smiled. The plants were just about ready for seed harvesting. Making a note to myself to harvest them later, I moved on to the pots of rosemary. All the while, Naruto's rant buzzed at the edge of my attention like a bothersome gnat. Dunno what people see in him, thinks he's better than everyone, that bast. Naruto, I said. But Mayo, you didn't see him. If you did, you'd totally agree with me. He's just too much of a boffa jerk. I paused in my inspection of the rosemary. Then, feeling like I was prodding a sleeping dragon, I asked, "Who are you talking about, exactly?" The sheer indignation that Naruto projected could have powered entire villages. "Weren't you listening?" he demanded. "I'm talking about that idiot Sasuke." His voice, incapable of portraying the extent of his outrage, broke on the of Sasuke. And then, as if unable to fully express his frustration through vocal means, he waved his arms around like an angry octopus. The flailing limbs knocked over a pot of rosemary, which in turn rolled over and crushed a nearby strawberry plant. "Naruto," I said, appalled at the senseless violence. I rushed over to the unfortunate strawberry plant, but found to my dismay that many of the not yet ripe berries had not escaped unscathed. "Ah! I'm sorry!" Naruto cried as I poked mournfully at the squashed berries. "You murdered my strawberries," I said, swiveling around. "It's not my fault. I mean Sasuke, if he didn't make me so mad." Oh no. He was not going to weasel his way out of this one. Especially not by shoving the blame onto someone I didn't even know, this Sasuke fellow, whoever he was. Sasuke, Uchiha Sasuke. I stopped and frowned. Uchiha. He was the famed survivor of the massacre? But how did I know that? No one ever told me the survivor's name. I never asked. Some strange, guilty part of me didn't want to know. And Naruto never said anything about Sasuke being an Uchiha. Maybe I heard it somewhere in passing, and subconsciously recognized it. Fistful of lightning. Pinwheel eyes. Snakes and betrayal and revenge and traitor. Wide eyes. Sharp intake of breath. I almost stumbled. Naruto was still talking, hands moving in wide arcs, quick and animated gesticulations. He seemed like something from far away. A fish floating through viscous waters. An insect caught in amber. He was frozen to me. But the world was hanging. I had to ask. "Naruto, what's Sasuke's family name?" My calmness surprised myself. "Eh? Oh, it's something stupid, like a fan Uchiwa?" With slow, deliberate movements, I righted the fallen rosemary plant. "Uchiha Sasuke?" "Yeah, that's it. Why?" Why, indeed? I wasn't entirely sure myself. But if there was one thing I learned, it was that my gut was rarely wrong. The only problem was voicing my instincts, making them heard without seeming weird or stupid. "Just be careful of him," I said, haltingly. I don't think just be careful." Okay, Naruto said, and I could tell he did not understand. I did not blame him. I didn't fully understand myself. We went back to work. It wasn't long before I registered a familiar chakra presence approaching, slipping through the bars of the gate. I tilted my head. How odd. Wasn't that? The chakra bristled and the presence moved. And then it was chaos. Arg. Get it off. I blinked. Naruto struggled. Tora yelled. The next few moments were spent trying to remove Tora the cat from Naruto's hair. It seemed that Tora, unsatisfied with her courtly life in the loving arms of the daimyo's wife, had opted to sneak out again.